My son scammed me out of $800,000 with a fake investment scheme. At his 36th birthday party, he mocked me in front of his wealthy friends. He said, "Dad, money just rots with you. Let me spend it for you. Call it filial duty." I just smiled and handed him a birthday envelope. When he opened it, his face went pale. 5 minutes later, the police showed up. Before I tell you how I sent my own son to federal prison, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach a painful lesson to someone you love. I stood at the counter of Chase Bank, and the air conditioning felt colder than a Chicago winter wind cutting through a thin coat. I have lived 70 years on this earth. I have built skyscrapers, poured concrete foundations for hospitals, and worked until my hands were as hard as the bricks I laid. I know what hard work feels like, and I know what emptiness feels like. But nothing prepared me for the emptiness I was looking at on the teller screen. Ms. Henderson, the branch manager who has known me for 15 years, looked like she was about to cry. She slid a piece of paper across the marble counter. Her hand was trembling slightly. "Mr. Carter," she whispered, "the balance is correct. $12.45. I stared at the number. $12. My life savings. $800,000. The money I had saved from 50 years of breathing in cement dust and waking up at 4 in the morning. The money for my retirement. The money meant to keep me out of a state-run nursing home. Gone. "Ms. Henderson," I said, my voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "This is a mistake. I did not authorize any transfers." She swallowed hard and typed something on her keyboard. Then she turned the monitor slightly so I could see. It was a digital copy of a document, a power of attorney, granting full access to Trayvon Carter. And at the bottom there was a signature, Desmond Carter. It looked like my signature. It had the same loops, the same heavy pressure on the D. To a banker, it was perfect. To a lawyer, it was valid. But as I looked at that ink on the screen, a cold realization started to spread from my stomach to my chest. I did not sign that. I looked up at Ms. Henderson. "I did not sign this," I said, calmer than I felt. "It was notarized 3 weeks ago, Mr. Carter," she said gently. "Your son came in with the paperwork. He said you were having trouble managing your affairs. He said you wanted to move the assets into a high-yield tech fund. Trouble managing my affairs. That is the polite way of saying I was losing my mind. That is the polite way of saying I was a senile old man who needed a babysitter." I thanked Ms. Henderson. I did not yell. I did not cause a scene. I walked out of the bank into the blinding sunlight of the parking lot. My Ford F-150 was parked in the back. It is an old truck dented on the side from a job site accident 10 years ago, but the engine is clean. I keep it running, just like I keep myself running. I sat in the truck and stared at the steering wheel. My hands were shaking, not from age, from rage. I pulled out my phone. It was an older model, the screen slightly cracked. I dialed Trayvon. He answered on the 4th ring. I could hear music in the background, loud thumping bass, and the sound of glasses clinking. It was 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. "Hey, Dad?" Trayvon's voice was smooth. Too smooth. Like oil on water. "What's up? I'm kind of in the middle of a meeting right now." "A meeting, Trayvon," I said. "I am at the bank." The music on his end seemed to stop, or maybe he just stepped into another room. There was a pause. A silence that lasted 2 seconds too long. "Oh," he said. His tone shifted. It became professional, patronizing. "Did you see the transfer I meant to tell you? I moved the liquidity into that tech startup fund I told you about, the one with the military-grade encryption security." I gripped the phone tighter. "You moved everything, Trayvon. You left me $12. "Dad, listen." He sighed the way a parent sighs at a toddler who dropped ice cream. "That is how investment works. You have to commit capital to see returns. This fund guarantees 15% monthly interest. You are going to be rich. I am doing this for you. You do not understand how the digital economy works. Money sitting in a savings account is dead money. I am making it work for you." I closed my eyes. I remembered 3 years ago, when Viola died. When my wife Viola passed, the silence in my house was deafening. We had been married 40 years. She handled the books. She handled the bills. I made the money. She managed it. When she was gone, I felt like a ship without a rudder. I was grieving. I was weak. And Trayvon, he was there. He helped me organize the funeral. He helped me sort through Viola's clothes. He looked at me with those eyes that looked so much like his mother's and said, "Dad, let me help you. You rest. I will handle the paperwork." I trusted him. Because he is my blood. Because he is the only thing of Viola I have left. I thought I was raising a man. I did not know I was raising a vulture. "Trayvon," I said into the phone, "bring the money back. I do not want 15%. I want my principal back. Today." "Dad, stop," he snapped. His voice lost its smoothness. It became sharp. "You are being irrational. The money is locked in a 6-month term. I cannot touch it. It is for your own good. Stop stressing out or you will have another heart attack. Trust me. I am the expert here. Now I have to go. Brittany is waiting. The clients are waiting." He hung up. I sat there in the silence of my truck. The line about the heart attack was a low blow. He knew I took medication for hypertension. He was using my health as a weapon to silence me. Locked in a 6-month term. Tech startup. Military encryption. I have built buildings for 50 years. I know when a structure is sound, and I know when it is rotten. This story was rotten. I put the key in the ignition, ready to drive home, ready to maybe believe him for just one more hour because the alternative was too painful to accept. The alternative was that my son was a thief. Then my phone buzzed in my hand. It was a notification from my credit card app, the one linked to the joint account I had added Trayvon to for emergencies only. Transaction alert, Gucci store, Michigan Avenue. Amount $5,200. Status approved. I stared at the screen. $5,000. He said he was in a meeting. He said the money was locked away. I looked at the time, 2:15 p.m. He was not investing in technology. He was investing in a handbag, or a suit, or a pair of shoes that cost more than my first car. A strange feeling washed over me. The shaking in my hands stopped. The grief I had been carrying for Viola, the confusion, the fear of getting old. It all evaporated. In its place, something cold and hard settled in my chest. It felt like the steel beams I used to hoist into the sky. My son thought I was a confused old man. He thought I was a resource to be mined. He thought that because I worked with my hands I was stupid. He forgot who I am. I am Desmond Carter. I survived the riots of '68. I survived the recession of 2008 when big companies collapsed like cardboard boxes. I survived burying the love of my life. I looked at the Gucci notification one last time, then I swiped it away. I did not start the engine yet. I sat there and let the truth sink in. My son did not just steal my money, he stole my trust. He stole the safety Viola and I worked 40 years to build. He wanted to play games. He wanted to talk about filial duty and managing affairs. Fine. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Gray hair, deep lines around the mouth, eyes that had seen too much. But the fire was not gone. It was just banking down, waiting for oxygen. "I am going to get my money back," I whispered to the empty truck. "And I am going to take back my dignity." I started the engine. The old truck roared to life, a deep, angry sound. I did not drive home. I drove to the one place Trayvon never thought I would go. I drove to the past, to the south side, to find a man named Marcus who owed me a favor. Trayvon thought he was playing chess with a pigeon. He was about to find out he was playing with a wolf. The $5,000 Gucci bag was the most expensive mistake of his life, not because of the price tag, but because it woke me up. The father who covered for his son's mistakes was dead. The foreman was back on the job. And I was about to inspect the whole damn building. Here is the detailed script for the next part of the story. It is written in a voice-over-friendly format, focusing on the raw emotion, the tension of the scene, and the internal monologue of Desmond Carter. My Ford F-150 rattled as I pulled up to the entrance of the Sovereign. It is one of those glass needles that pierce the Chicago skyline, a place where the air smells like money and exclusion. My truck is 20 years old. It has rust spots on the wheel wells and the bed is scratched from hauling lumber and concrete. It is a working man's truck. And in the driveway of the Sovereign, surrounded by Mercedes and Teslas, it looked like a scar on a beautiful face. I put the truck in park and the engine shuddered into silence. Before I could even unbuckle my seatbelt, a security guard was tapping on my window. He was young, wearing a uniform that fit him too tightly with a gold badge that shone in the sun. He looked at my flannel shirt and my work boots with a mixture of suspicion and disdain. "Sir, the delivery entrance is around the back," he said. He did not ask. He commanded. He assumed that a black man in an old truck could only be there to fix a toilet or deliver a package. I rolled down the window. The air conditioning from the lobby drifted out smelling of lavender and cold cash. "I am not a delivery man," I said, keeping my voice low. "I am here to see my son. Trevon Carter, Penthouse B." The guard blinked. He looked at his clipboard, then back at my truck, then back at me. His skepticism was an insult without words. He picked up a phone attached to the stone pillar of the gatehouse. "I will have to verify that," he said. I waited. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles aching. I built buildings like this. I poured the foundations that hold these glass towers up. I welded the beams that keep them from swaying in the wind. And now I have to beg a child in a polyester uniform for permission to see my own son. "Mr. Carter says you can go up," the guard said, finally sounding disappointed. "But you cannot park here. Guest parking is on level 4. Do not block the entrance." I drove past him without a word. Level 4. The deepest, darkest part of the garage. Fitting. The elevator ride to the penthouse took 30 seconds. It was silent and smooth, unlike the elevators in the construction sites I used to work on. The doors slid open and I stepped directly into the apartment. The first thing I saw was the light. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Lake Michigan. It was breathtaking, and it was expensive. The second thing I saw was the mess. It was not a dirty mess. It was a mess of excess. Boxes were everywhere. Orange boxes, black boxes with silver lettering. Tissue paper littered the floor like snow. Trevon was standing in the middle of the living room holding a suit jacket up to the light. He was wearing silk pajamas. At 3 in the afternoon, Brittany, his wife, was kneeling on the floor surrounded by shoes. She looked up as I walked in. She did not smile. She did not say hello. Her eyes darted immediately to my feet. "Dad," she said, her voice sharp, "please, watch where you step. That is a hand-woven Persian silk rug. It costs more than your truck. Don't track grease onto it." I stopped. I looked down at my boots. They were clean. I had polished them this morning out of habit. But to her, they would always be dirty. To her, I would always be the man who smells like sweat and drywall. I did not apologize. I stepped onto the rug. I felt the soft silk crush under my heel. "Where's my money, Trevon?" I asked. Trevon lowered the suit jacket. He smiled that practiced, slippery smile he had developed over the last few years. The smile of a man who believes his own lies. "Dad, you made it." "Welcome to the headquarters of Carter Holdings." He spread his arms wide, gesturing to the room full of shopping bags. "I told you I was in a meeting earlier. We are setting up the home office." "Headquarters?" I asked, looking around. "It looks like a shopping mall exploded in here." Brittany stood up, holding a pair of heels that looked like they were made of glass. "You just don't understand modern business, Desmond," she said. "Image is everything. Trevon needs to look the part to attract high-level investors. We are building a brand." I looked at her. "A brand." "You are building a brand with my retirement fund." Trevon walked over to a glass desk that looked too fragile to hold a cup of coffee. He picked up a leather binder and held it out to me. "Look, Dad, I knew you would be worried. You are old school, you like paper, so I printed it out for you. This is the prospectus." I took the binder. It was heavy. The paper was thick and glossy. The logo, Carter Holdings, was embossed in gold on the front. It looked professional. It looked official. I opened it. I have read thousands of blueprints in my life. I know how to look for structural weaknesses. I know when a load-bearing wall is missing. I scanned the pages. Lots of graphs. Lots of words like synergy and crypto leverage and algorithmic yield. But there were no account numbers. There were no tax IDs. There was no custodian bank listed. It was a prop, a movie prop designed to shut me up. "Trevon," I said, looking up from the pages. "This is nonsense. These are just pictures. Where is the principal? Where is the $800,000 actually sitting right now? It is in the cloud." Dad Trevon laughed, pouring himself a drink from a crystal decanter. "It is distributed across the blockchain. You can't just point to a vault and say, 'There it is.' That is archaic thinking." He took a sip of the amber liquid. I could smell it from here. Aged scotch. Expensive. I closed the binder and tossed it onto the glass desk. It made a heavy slap sound that made Brittany flinch. "You are lying to me," I said. My voice was steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. "You are spending it. You are not investing it. You are spending it on this." I gestured to the room, to the view, to the silk pajamas. Brittany stepped forward, her face flushing red. "How dare you?" she hissed. "We are working our asses off to multiply your money. You should be grateful. Most children would put you in a home and forget about you. We are trying to build a legacy for this family, and you come in here with your dirty boots and your small-minded accusations. Grateful, I asked. Grateful that you stole the money I saved to keep myself alive. Trayvon sighed and set his drink down. Dad, you are being dramatic. Look at the time. I have a Zoom call with partners in Tokyo in 10 minutes. He checked his wrist. That was when the world stopped moving. On his wrist was a watch. It was heavy, gold and blue, a Rolex Submariner. I know that watch. I had seen it in a magazine once when I was waiting at the cardiologist's office. I remembered the price because I had compared it to the cost of my medication. That watch cost $40,000. My heart medication costs $3,000 a month without insurance. Since I retired, coverage has been tight. I have to ration pills sometimes. I have to break them in half to make them last until the next check comes in. I looked at the gold glinting on his wrist. That was not a watch. That was 13 months of my heartbeat. That was 13 months of my life strapped to his wrist as a fashion statement. He saw me looking. He pulled his sleeve down quickly, but it was too late. You bought a Rolex, I said. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. It was a signing bonus, Trevon stammered. A gift from a partner. Liar, I whispered. He bought a $40,000 watch while I am splitting pills to keep my blood pressure down. He is drinking scotch while I am drinking tap water to save money on filters. The realization hit me harder than any physical blow I have ever taken on a construction site. It wasn't just greed. It wasn't just stupidity. It was cannibalism. They were eating me. They were stripping the meat from my bones to feed their vanity. They did not care if I lived or died as long as the check cleared before my heart stopped. I looked at Brittany. She was sneering at me, guarding her Persian rug like a dragon guarding gold. I looked at Trayvon, my son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the boy I held when he cried over a scraped knee. He was gone. The boy was gone. Standing in front of me was a parasite in silk pajamas. I took a deep breath. The air in the penthouse was cool, recycled, and lifeless. Fine, I said. I pulled my shoulders back. I straightened my spine. The joints popped a sound like a gunshot in the quiet room. What Trayvon asked, confused by my sudden calm. I said, fine. I repeated. I see you are busy. Big business. Tokyo partners. I won't take up any more of your time. Trayvon relaxed. His shoulders dropped. He thought he had won. He thought the glossy binder and the big words had confused the old man enough to make him retreat. Exactly, Dad. Glad you understand. We will have dinner next week. Okay, once the dividends roll in. I turned to leave. I walked off the Persian rug, making sure to grind my heel slightly into the delicate fabric. Brittany gasped, but I didn't look back. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the button. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. Because men like me, men who build things, we don't destroy things in a rage. We dismantle them. Brick by brick, bolt by bolt. As the elevator doors closed, cutting off the view of my son and his stolen luxury, I touched the pocket of my flannel shirt. I felt the outline of my phone. I wasn't going to the police yet. That was too easy. They needed to feel safe. They needed to feel untouchable. I was going to see Marcus. And we were going to bring this whole glass tower crashing down. My son wanted to play big business. He wanted to talk about filial duty. I was about to teach him the most important lesson in business. Read the fine print. And the fine print of betraying Desmond Carter was about to cost him everything. I stood with my hand on the cold metal handle of the penthouse door, but I did not turn it. I could not leave. Not yet. Not without giving my son one last chance to be a human being. I turned back around. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating, smelling of expensive lilies and betrayal. Trayvon was still holding his scotch. Brittany had crossed her arms over her chest, tapping her foot on the hardwood floor where the Persian rug ended. They looked like a tableau of modern success. Young, beautiful, and completely rotten on the inside. I took a breath that rattled in my chest. Trayvon, I said, and my voice was low, barely a whisper. I am not asking you as an investor. I am asking you as your father. I am asking you as the man who carried you on his shoulders when you were too tired to walk. Return the principal. Give me back my life savings. I will walk away. I will forget the watch. I will forget the lies. Just give me the money back so I can live my final years with some dignity." The room went silent. For a second, I saw something flicker in Trayvon's eyes. Shame, guilt. A memory of the father who taught him how to throw a baseball. But then Brittany stepped forward. She moved between me and my son like a shield, but she was not protecting him from me. She was protecting the money from my hands. "Desmond," she said, and her voice was no longer sharp. It was terrifyingly calm. It was the voice of a woman who negotiates deals for a living, a woman who knows exactly where the bodies are buried. "We cannot return the money. It is not liquid. It is tied up in long-term positions." "I know what that means, Brittany," I said, my anger rising again. "It means you spent it." She smiled. A cold, thin smile that did not reach her eyes. "It means that the money is under management. Our management. And frankly, Desmond, you are in no position to make demands." "What does that mean?" I asked. She walked over to the kitchen island and picked up a file folder. She opened it and pretended to read, though I knew she had memorized every word. "It means," she said, looking up at me over the top of the folder, "that we have been very concerned about your mental state lately. Ever since Viola died, you have been erratic. You forget things, you get angry easily, you are paranoid." My hands curled into fists at my sides. "I am not paranoid, I am being robbed." Trayvon finally spoke up. He stepped out from behind his wife, emboldened by her cruelty. "Dad, she is right. Last week you forgot to pay the water bill, and the neighbors said you were shouting at the mailman. I shouted at the mailman because he drove over my hydrangeas. The hydrangeas your mother planted," I roared. "See?" Brittany said softly, as if speaking to a child. Uncontrollable rage. Signs of early onset dementia. It is tragic, really. I looked from one to the other. I realized then that this was not a spur-of-the-moment theft. This was a siege. They had been planning this. Every time I forgot my keys, every time I got sad about Viola, they were taking notes. They were building a case. "So here's the situation." Desmond Brittany continued, closing the folder with a snap. "You can walk out of here and let us manage the investment as we see fit. You will get a monthly allowance, enough for groceries and your little pills. Or," she paused, letting the silence stretch out until it hummed. "Or," I asked. "Or we file a petition with the court for full conservatorship," she said. "We have the evidence. We have the doctor's notes from your checkups, which Trayvon so helpfully attended with you. We have the testimony of neighbors. We will prove that you are mentally incompetent. We will prove you are a danger to yourself and your finances." I felt the blood drain from my face. Conservatorship. It was a word I had heard on the news. It meant losing everything. My right to sign checks, my right to drive, my right to decide where I sleep. "And if we have to go down that road," Brittany said, her voice dropping to a whisper that sounded like a snake sliding through dry leaves, "we won't be able to keep you in that big empty house anymore. It is too dangerous for a man in your condition. We would have to move you to a facility." "A facility? You know, the one on the south side, the Greenwood State Home?" she asked. I knew it. Everyone in Chicago knew Greenwood. It was where old people went to die when they had no money and no family who cared. It smelled of urine and boiled cabbage. The staff was overworked and underpaid. I had visited a friend there once. He had bed sores the size of dinner plates because no one turned him over. "You wouldn't," I whispered. Trayvon looked down at his Rolex. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Dad, it is not what we want. But if you keep acting crazy, if you keep threatening us, we have to do what is best for you. Safety first, right?" That is what you always taught me on the job site. Safety first. He used my own words against me. The words I used to keep him safe from falling steel beams he was now using to bury me in a grave of bureaucracy and neglect. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. I saw the fear in him. But it wasn't fear of losing me. It was fear of losing the lifestyle I had just bought him. He was terrified of going back to being average. He was terrified of Brittany leaving him if the money dried up. He was a coward, and cowards are the most dangerous men on earth because they will do anything to survive. They had me. If I fought them now, if I called the police, they would pull out the dementia card. They would show the power of attorney I supposedly signed. They would drag this out in court for years. I didn't have years, and I didn't have the money to hire a lawyer to fight them because they had all my money. I was a man standing on a ledge and my own family was greasing the soles of my boots. The rage inside me was a hot white sun. But I forced it down. I swallowed it. It tasted like bile. I needed to think like a general, not a victim. A general does not attack when he is outnumbered and outgunned. A general retreats. A general regroups. A general lulls the enemy into a false sense of security. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face fall. I made myself look smaller, older, more defeated. I took a shaky breath and reached for the door handle again. "You would put me in Greenwood?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Only if you force our hand," Dad Trayvon said quickly. "We love you. We just want you to be safe. Safe." The word hung in the air like a bad joke. I looked at the floor. I stared at the spot where my heel had crushed the silk rug. "Okay," I said softly. "What?" Brittany asked, her eyes narrowing. I said, "Okay," I repeated. I am tired, Trayvon. I am too old to fight. I don't want to go to court. I don't want to go to a home." I looked up at them. I made sure my eyes looked watery and weak. "If you say the money is invested, then I have to trust you. You are my son. You wouldn't destroy me." Trayvon let out a breath he had been holding. He grinned relief washing over his face. He stepped forward and clapped a hand on my shoulder. His hand felt heavy and foreign. "That is the right decision, Dad. You won't regret it. We are going to take care of you. You'll see. The returns are going to be huge." Brittany relaxed too. She smirked a look of pure triumph. She thought she had broken the old horse. She thought I was ready for the glue factory. "Just don't send me away," I said, playing the part of the scared old man. "Let me stay in my house." "As long as you behave," Brittany said. "As long as you let us handle the finances without interference." I nodded slowly. "I understand. I just want peace. I just want to live out my days in peace." "Good," Trayvon said. "Go home, Dad. Get some rest. We will order you some groceries online so you don't have to go out." He was dismissing me, like a servant. I opened the door. I walked out into the hallway. I did not look back. I knew if I looked back, I would vomit or I would kill them. The heavy door clicked shut behind me. I stood in the hallway for a long time. The elevator bell dinged, but I didn't move. I leaned my forehead against the cool plaster of the wall. They thought I was defeated. They thought the threat of a nursing home had paralyzed me with fear. They were wrong. The threat didn't paralyze me. It clarified things. They had crossed the final line. There was no going back now. There was no saving Trayvon. The boy I raised was dead. The thing in that apartment was a stranger who would sell my corpse for a better interest rate. I pushed myself off the wall. I walked into the elevator and pressed the button for the garage. My reflection in the mirrored walls of the elevator stared back at me. I didn't look like a scared old man. I looked like a man who had just cleared the site for demolition. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the contacts list. I scrolled past Trayvon. I scrolled past the family friends who would tell me to forgive him. I stopped at a name I hadn't called in 10 years. Marcus. IRS retired. He was the only man I knew who hated thieves more than I did. I pressed call. "You want peace, Trayvon," I whispered to the empty elevator as the numbers counted down. "I will give you peace. The peace of a concrete cell." The elevator doors opened. I walked to my truck. The darkness of the parking garage felt welcoming. It was time to go to work. The foundation was rotten. It was time to bring the house down. I drove south. The city changed around me as I left the gleaming towers of downtown and entered the neighborhoods where the sidewalks were cracked and the streetlights flickered. This was my Chicago. The Chicago of brick bungalows, corner stores with bars on the windows and people who looked you in the eye when they passed you. I parked my truck in front of a small, neat house on 87th Street. The lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. The gutters were clean. I knew they were clean because I was the one who installed them 10 years ago. I sat in the truck for a moment listening to the engine cool. Rain had started to fall, a cold drizzle that made the world look gray and tired. I felt a heavy weight in my pocket, the flash drive I had taken from Trayvon's desk while he was busy pouring scotch. I wasn't just a construction worker. I was a father who knew his son's passwords because his son was too lazy to change them from his birthday. I walked up the path and knocked on the door, 3 sharp raps. The door opened, and Marcus stood there. He was older than me, maybe 75, but he stood straight as a plumb line. He wore a cardigan over a crisp button-down shirt, and his glasses hung on a chain around his neck. Marcus was a man who had spent 40 years working for the IRS. He had spent his life hunting down tax cheats, money launderers, and corporate thieves. He could look at a spreadsheet and smell a lie from 3 pages away. "Desmond," he said, his voice deep and gravelly. "You look like you just walked off a demolition site. I feel like one," I said. Marcus stepped back and held the door open. "Come in, the coffee is fresh." His house smelled of old paper and lemon polish. It was a sanctuary of order. We sat at his dining room table, which was covered in stacks of files. Marcus never really retired. He just stopped going to the office. I put the flash drive on the table. It made a small click against the wood. "I need you to look at something, Marcus." He looked at the drive, then at me. "Is this about Trayvon?" I nodded. Marcus sighed. He took off his glasses and cleaned them with the hem of his shirt. "I remember when that boy was born, Desmond. I remember you handing out cigars at the Union Hall. You were so proud. You said he was going to be the first Carter to wear a suit to work." "He is wearing suits, Marcus," I said, my voice tight. "Silk ones, paid for with my retirement fund." Marcus didn't ask any more questions. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He picked up the drive and walked to his computer desk in the corner. He plugged it in. The screen illuminated his face in a blue glow. I pulled up a chair and sat behind him, watching as his fingers flew across the keyboard. He wasn't hacking. He was auditing. He was logging into public record databases, cross-referencing LLC filings and tracing routing numbers. For 20 minutes, the only sound in the room was the clicking of the keys and the rain against the window. Then Marcus stopped. He leaned back in his chair and took a long, slow breath. "Desmond, you need to see this." I leaned forward. The screen was filled with rows of numbers, red numbers. "This is the account you transferred the $800,000 into," Marcus said, pointing a gnarled finger at the screen. "Trayvon set it up as a shell company. Carter Tech Ventures, LLC. Sounds impressive, right?" I nodded. "Look where the money went," Marcus said. He clicked a tab. The list of transactions scrolled down the screen like a waterfall. There were no investments in technology. There were no stock purchases. There were no bonds. Golden Palace Online Casino, $5,000. $5,000. $10,000. DraftKings VIP, $20,000. Saks Fifth Avenue, $12,000. Porsche Financial Services, lease down payment, $18,000. I felt like I was going to be sick. The numbers blurred before my eyes. "He is gambling it," I whispered. "He is not just gambling," Marcus said, his voice hard. "He is hemorrhaging money. Look at these dates. He lost $50,000 in one night playing online poker. That was last Tuesday. Last Tuesday, the same day I was eating a tuna sandwich for dinner because I wanted to save money on groceries." "And look here," Marcus continued, scrolling down further. "Brittany Miller Carter, my daughter-in-law. There were transfers to her personal accounts labeled consulting fees, $5,000 a week, and then from her account payments to credit cards. Payments to luxury travel agencies, a booking for a yacht charter in the Mediterranean for next month. They are going on vacation," I said, staring at the screen. "They stole my life savings and they are going on a yacht." "It is a Ponzi scheme of 2 people," Marcus said. "They are moving money from your account to theirs to pay off their old debts and then spending the rest to keep up appearances. They are broke, Desmond. Or they were until they got their hands on your nest egg." I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the gray street. I felt a cold rage settling in my bones, replacing the shock. "Is that it?" I asked. "Is the money all gone?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. The clicking of the keyboard started again. It was faster this time, more urgent. "Desmond, come back here," Marcus said. His voice had changed. It was lower, more serious. I turned around. Marcus was looking at a different document now. It wasn't a bank statement. It looked like a legal deed. "What is it?" I asked. "You own your house free and clear, right?" Marcus asked. "The brownstone on 43rd Street, the one your grandfather bought in 1950. "Yes," I said. "Paid off the mortgage 20 years ago. It is the only thing I have left besides the truck." Marcus turned the monitor toward me. "Not anymore." I stared at the document on the screen. It was a filing with the Cook County Recorder of Deeds. Notice of lien. Debtor Desmond Carter. Collateral 2415 West 43rd Street. Lender Shadow Creek Capital. Amount $300,000. I felt the room spin. I had to grab the back of the chair to keep from falling. What does that mean? I rasped. It means someone took out a second mortgage on your house 3 months ago, Marcus said grimly. A high-interest loan. The kind you get from lenders who don't ask too many questions as long as the paperwork looks right. I didn't sign that, I said. I shouted it. I didn't sign anything. Marcus zoomed in on the signature at the bottom of the loan document. There it was again. Desmond Carter. The same forgery. The same loop on the D. Trevon, I breathed. He didn't just empty your bank account, Marcus said, taking off his glasses and rubbing his eyes tiredly. He leveraged your home. He forged your signature on a deed of trust. He borrowed $300,000 against your house, probably to pay off gambling debts before he even got access to your retirement fund. And the worst part, Marcus pointed to a line at the bottom. Default status pending. He hasn't made a payment in 2 months, Marcus said. Desmond, they are preparing to foreclose. You could lose the house. The house. My grandfather bought that house when black men couldn't buy property in half the city. My father raised me there. I raised Trayvon there. Viola died in the master bedroom holding my hand. Every scratch on the floorboards has a story. Every layer of paint on the walls holds a memory. And Trayvon had sold it. He had sold our history to a loan shark for poker chips and a Gucci bag. I sank into the chair next to Marcus. I put my head in my hands. I wanted to cry, but my eyes were dry. The betrayal was too deep for tears. It was a physical pain like a knife twisting in my gut. He is trying to make me homeless, I said. He told me today. He told me he might have to put me in a nursing home for my own safety. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. That son of a bitch. He is not a son, I said. I looked up. My voice was steady again. The shock was gone. The grief was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard clarity of a demolition expert looking at a condemned building. He is not a son. He is a criminal. Marcus looked at me. His eyes were sharp, calculating. What do you want to do, Desmond? We can go to the police right now. This is fraud, forgery, elder abuse. No, I said. Marcus looked surprised. No, if I go to the police now, Trevon will claim it was a misunderstanding. He will claim I authorized it. He has that power of attorney. He has the dementia story he is planting. It will be his word against mine, and he has expensive lawyers paid for with my money. Then what? Marcus asked. I need undeniable proof, I said. I need him to admit it. I need him to hang himself. I looked at the screen at the list of gambling debts and the foreclosure notice. Who is Shadow Creek Capital? I asked. Marcus typed a few keys. Bottom feeders. Predatory lenders. They operate out of a storefront on Western Avenue. Do they have the original wet ink documents? I asked. They should, Marcus said. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I am going to pay them a visit, I said. Desmond, be careful, Marcus warned. These are not nice people. I am not a nice person anymore either, Marcus, I said. The nice person died when he saw his son wearing a Rolex bought with his life's blood. I walked to the door. Desmond, Marcus called out. I turned back. You fixed my roof when I didn't have a dime to pay you, Marcus said. You kept my house dry. I will help you bring yours down on their heads. I will prepare the file for the IRS tax evasion. Unreported income. When you are ready to pull the trigger, I will make sure they never see the sun again. Thank you, brother, I said. I walked out into the rain. The drops felt cold on my face, but I didn't mind. I needed the cold. I needed to freeze my heart so I could do what had to be done. I got into my truck and started the engine. My son thought he was playing a game. He thought he was a big-shot investor. But he had made a fatal mistake. He forgot where he came from. He forgot that the house he mortgaged wasn't just a building, it was a fortress, and he had just let the enemy inside the walls. But he forgot one thing. I am the one who built the walls, and I am the only one who knows how to tear them down. I put the truck in gear. Next stop, Shadow Creek Capital. It was time to meet the sharks, and I was bringing a harpoon. The hardest part of building a trap is not the digging or the camouflage. It is the waiting. It is standing perfectly still while the animal you are hunting sniffs the bait, deciding whether to bite or run. For the next week, I became an actor. I did not go to Hollywood. I went to my own closet. I found shirts that were slightly too big, stained with old coffee spills I had never bothered to wash out. I stopped shaving every day, letting white stubble patch across my jaw like weeds in a neglected lot. But the real performance was in the hands. I spent hours in front of the bathroom mirror practicing the tremor. I held my coffee cup and forced my muscles to spasm, spilling liquid onto the counter. I watched my own eyes, learning how to make them look vacant, how to stare past things instead of at them. I had to become what they wanted to see. They wanted a senile, helpless old man. Fine. I would give them a performance worthy of an Academy Award. On Friday night, I drove to the penthouse again. Trayvon had invited me for a small dinner. He said it was family time, but I knew what it really was. It was a stress test. They wanted to see if I was still a threat or if I had broken under the pressure of their threats. I walked in with a cane I had bought at a thrift store. I did not need a cane. My legs were as strong as steel beams. But the cane made a tapping sound on their marble floors that annoyed Brittany. That was a bonus. "Oh, look," Brittany said as I shuffled into the dining room. "The ghost of Christmas past has arrived." She was sitting at the head of the table holding a wine glass the size of a fishbowl. There were 3 other people there, her friends. A man in a tight suit who looked like a shark and 2 women with faces so pulled back by surgery they looked permanently surprised. Trayvon stood up. He looked tired. "Dad, glad you could make it. Sit down." I stared at him blankly for a second too long. Then I smiled a loose, confused smile. "Is your mother in the kitchen, son?" I asked. I thought I smelled her peach cobbler. The room went silent. Viola had been dead for 3 years. Trayvon knew that. Brittany knew that. Trayvon closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Dad, Mom is gone. Remember, we visited her grave last month." "Oh," I said, looking down at my hands. Right, I forgot. My mind, it is like a sieve these days." I saw Brittany smirk at her friends. She leaned over to the woman next to her and whispered loud enough for me to hear. "See, I told you. The lights are on, but nobody is home. It is exhausting." I sat down. The chair was velvet, soft, expensive, paid for with my sweat. The dinner was an ordeal. They ate tiny portions of raw fish and drank wine that cost more than my monthly electric bill. They talked about the market, about vacations in Tulum, about people I did not know. They ignored me completely. To them, I was just a piece of furniture that breathed. Then Brittany decided she needed entertainment. "So Desmond," she said, her voice sharp and loud like she was talking to a deaf person. "Trayvon tells me you got lost going to the grocery store yesterday. Is that true?" I hadn't gotten lost. I had gone to meet Marcus to finalize the paperwork for the IRS. But I nodded slowly. "Everything looks the same," I mumbled, stabbing at a piece of lettuce with my fork. "The streets, they keep changing the signs." The man in the tight suit laughed. "That is called gentrification, old-timer. Or maybe it is just the neurons firing blanks." Brittany laughed with him, a cruel tinkling sound. "Honestly, it is a burden," she said to the table, gesturing at me with her fork. "We have to manage everything for him. His bills, his house, his life. He is basically a walking debt at this point. A liability we inherited. A walking debt." I gripped my fork under the table. I wanted to stand up and flip the table over. I wanted to tell them that this walking debt had built half the schools in this district. I wanted to tell them that my liability bank account was the only reason they weren't living in a studio apartment in the suburbs. But I didn't. I let the insult wash over me. I let it fuel the fire in my gut. "I am sorry to be a burden," I whispered, letting my voice crack. "Oh, stop it," Brittany sighed, rolling her eyes. "Don't start with the pity party. Just eat your salad." Now was the time. I reached into my pocket. My fingers closed around a small black disc. It was a listening device Marcus had given me. High-powered, magnetic, smaller than a coat button. I needed to get it under the table. I let my hand spasm. I knocked my fork against my water glass. It tipped over. Ice water flooded the table. It soaked the expensive tablecloth. It dripped onto Brittany's lap. "Oh my God," Brittany shrieked, jumping up. "You clumsy old fool, look what you did. This is Italian linen. I am sorry, I cried out, acting panicked. I tried to stand up, but I let my cane slide out from under me. I fell, not hard. I knew how to fall safely from my construction days, but it looked dramatic. I collapsed onto the floor right next to the table leg. Dad, Trevon yelled, but he didn't rush to help me immediately. He hesitated. He looked at the mess first. That hesitation gave me 3 seconds. I was on my hands and knees under the table, hidden by the long tablecloth. I reached up. I felt the smooth wood of the underside of the table. Click. The magnet snapped into place. It was right next to where Trayvon was sitting. I stayed on the floor, groaning, acting like I couldn't get up. Trayvon finally ducked under the tablecloth. He grabbed my arm. "Dad, get up. Jesus, you are making a scene." He hauled me to my feet. I leaned heavily on him, playing up the frailty. I slipped. I stammered. "The floor is slippery." Brittany was dabbing at her dress with a napkin, her face twisted in pure hatred. "Get him out of here, Trayvon. Seriously, before he breaks the china. I cannot deal with this tonight." Trayvon looked at me. There was no sympathy in his eyes, just annoyance and shame. Shame that his cool, rich friends had to see his broken-down father. "Come on, Dad," he said, guiding me firmly toward the door. "I will call you an Uber. You shouldn't be driving." I let him lead me out. I walked with my head down, the picture of a defeated man. "I am sorry, son," I whispered as the elevator doors closed. "I ruined your party." "Yeah. Well, it happens," Trevon muttered, not looking at me. "Just go home and sleep, Dad. We will talk later." He couldn't wait to get rid of me. He sent me down to the lobby and turned back to his party, back to his wife, back to the Sharks. I sat in the Uber watching the city lights blur past. The driver asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine. I was better than fine. I had left my ears in the room. When I got back to my silent house, I didn't go to sleep. I went to the kitchen table. I poured a glass of tap water. I put my phone on the table and opened the app Marcus had installed. The audio feed was live. I put on my headphones. At first it was just the sound of silverware on plates and the murmur of conversation. They were laughing about me. The man in the suit was making a joke about nursing homes. Then the guests left. I heard the door close. The audio became clearer. Just 2 voices now, Trayvon and Brittany. "I can't believe he spilled water on me," Brittany complained, the sound of glass clinking against a bottle. "More wine." "He is getting worse, Trayvon. We can't keep doing this charade." "I know, babe, I know," Trayvon said. He sounded drunk. "But we have to wait until the court date to file for conservatorship." "No, we don't," Brittany snapped. I pressed the headphones tighter against my ears. "What do you mean?" Trayvon asked. "We need the cash now," Brittany said. Her voice dropped lower, but the bug picked it up perfectly. "That broker called me today. The yacht owner in Cabo. He has another offer. If we don't put down the deposit by the 20th, we lose the boat." "We don't have the liquidity," Britt Trevon argued. "We spent the last of Dad's cash on the car and the furniture." "We have the house," Brittany said. I stopped breathing. "The house is in his name," Trevon said. "We can't sell it until we have power of attorney." "We have the lien, you idiot," Brittany hissed. "Shadow Creek Capital. If the payments aren't made, they foreclose." "Yeah, but foreclosure takes months," Trayvon said. "Not if the owner agrees to a short sale to avoid bankruptcy," Brittany said. "What are you saying?" "I am saying," Brittany said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, a cold, predatory sound. "I am saying that on your birthday next week we get him to sign one more paper. We tell him it is a modification to his insurance, or a birthday card, whatever. He is so out of it he won't even read it. We get him to sign a quitclaim deed. We transfer the title to the LLC, then we sell it to the cash buyer I have lined up. We can close in 3 days. Sell the house. My house." "But Dad lives there," Trevon said weakly. Brittany laughed. "Who cares? By the time the new owners kick him out, we will be on the yacht. We will send him to Greenwood. The state pays for that. Problem solved." There was a long silence on the tape. I waited for my son to defend me. I waited for him to say no. I waited for him to say that you cannot sell a man's home out from under him while he is still sleeping in it. "That sounds like a plan," Trevon said finally. "Let's do it. Happy birthday to me." I took the headphones off. I sat in the darkness of my kitchen. The house groaned around me, settling in the night wind. It knew. The walls knew. The floorboards knew. They were coming for the roof over my head. They were coming to erase the last trace of my existence on this earth. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Trayvon's birthday was in 5 days. 5 days. They thought they were planning a celebration. They thought they were planning a closing. They were wrong. They were planning their own funeral. I wasn't going to sign a deed. I was going to sign a warrant. I picked up the phone and dialed Marcus. It was late, but I knew he was awake. "Marcus," I said. "Yeah, Desmond." "Get the paperwork ready for the FBI," I said. "And Marcus." "Yeah, find out who the cash buyer is for my house. I want to invite them to the party too." The game of acting senile was over. The curtain was coming down. And when it rose again, I wouldn't be the helpless old man on the floor. I would be the judge, the jury, and the executioner. Shadow Creek Capital was not located in a glass tower like my son's apartment. It was located in a strip mall on Western Avenue, sandwiched between a nail salon and a liquor store that had been robbed twice last month. The neon sign in the window flickered with a buzzing sound that set my teeth on edge. Loans. Fast cash. No credit check. I parked my truck right in front. I wanted them to see it. I wanted them to see the heavy steel bumper and the tools in the back. I wanted them to know that a working man had arrived, and working men are dangerous when you mess with their livelihood. I buttoned my jacket over my flannel shirt. I checked my pocket to make sure the audio recorder was still running. Then I pushed open the door. A bell chimed a cheerful sound that felt out of place in a room that smelled of stale cigarette smoke and desperation. The waiting room was small. The carpet was gray and stained. A woman behind a thick plexiglass window looked up from her phone. She was chewing gum with a slow, rhythmic motion. "Can I help you?" she asked without smiling. "I am here to see the manager," I said. My voice was low. I did not sound like a customer. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, popping a bubble. "Tell him Desmond Carter is here," I said. "Tell him I am here about the house on 43rd Street. She stared at me for a second, then picked up a phone. She whispered something, nodded, and buzzed the door open. "Go on back," she said. "Last door on the left." I walked down a narrow hallway. The walls were thin drywall, poorly taped and painted with a cheap beige that was already peeling. I could hear voices coming from the other rooms, people begging for more time, people crying. This was a factory of misery. I pushed open the last door. The office was small and cluttered. Behind a desk that looked like it was made of compressed sawdust sat a man. He was huge. His neck was thicker than my thigh, and he wore a suit that was shiny in the elbows. He looked like a man who used to break legs for a living but decided paperwork was safer. "Mr. Carter," he said, not standing up. "I'm Rick. I assume you are here to make a payment on your son's behalf. We were about to send a notice of default." He leaned back in his chair, interlacing his fingers behind his head. He thought he had all the power. He thought I was just another scared old man coming to beg for an extension. I did not sit in the chair opposite his desk. Instead, I walked to the corner of the room. I looked up at the ceiling tiles. They were water-stained, sagging brown circles that looked like bruises. I looked at the window. It was barred from the outside. I looked at the back door. It was blocked by a stack of filing cabinets. Rick frowned. "Hey, sit down. What are you doing?" I turned to him. I did not look at his face. I looked at the wall behind him. "You know, Rick," I said calmly, "I spent 40 years in construction. I was a foreman for 20 of them. I know the Chicago building code better than I know the Bible." Rick laughed, a dry, humorless bark. "Is that right? Well, good for you. Now about the $300,000 your son borrowed." I walked over to the blocked back door. I kicked the filing cabinet. It made a hollow metallic thud. Chicago Municipal Code. Chapter 13. Section 160. I said, reciting the numbers from memory. "Obstruction of a means of egress. That is a serious violation, Rick. If a fire starts in this tinderbox, that door is useless." Rick stopped smiling. "What are you talking about?" "And that wall," I pointed to the partition separating his office from the hallway. "That is a load-bearing modification. I can see where the header is sagging." "Did you pull a permit for that?" "I don't see a permit posted anywhere." Rick stood up. His face was turning a shade of red that matched the brickwork outside. "Listen, old man. I don't know who you think you are, but you need to sit down or get out. You owe us money." I walked closer to his desk. I leaned in, placing my hands flat on the cheap wood. My hands are scarred. My knuckles are swollen from arthritis. But they are heavy hands. I don't owe you a dime, Rick. But here's the situation. I have a friend at the Department of Buildings. His name is Kowalski. We play poker on Tuesdays. If I make one phone call, he will have an inspector here in 20 minutes. I paused, letting the silence fill the room. They will cite you for the blocked exit. They will cite you for the unpermitted electrical work I saw in the hallway. That exposed conduit is a fire hazard, by the way. And they will definitely cite you for the lack of ventilation in a commercial space. Rick's eyes darted around the room. He was a predator, but he was used to preying on the weak. He wasn't used to preying on someone who knew the rules of the jungle better than he did. They will condemn this building, Rick, I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper. They will slap a red sticker on the front door today. They will shut you down. All your files, all your computers, all your cash, locked inside until you pay the fines and bring everything up to code. That will cost you, what, 50,000, 100,000 plus the downtime. Rick swallowed. I saw his Adam's apple bob. He sat back down slowly. What do you want? He asked. The arrogance was gone. Now it was a business transaction. I want the file, I said. The Carter file. You want to pay it off? No, I said. I want a copy. A full copy. The loan application. The promissory note. The deed of trust. And I want to see the original signature. Rick narrowed his eyes. Why? Because I didn't sign it, I said. And I want to see who did. Rick looked at me for a long moment. He was calculating the risk. If he gave me the file, he admitted to holding a fraudulent loan. But if he didn't, I would burn his business to the ground with a single phone call to the city. He opened a drawer. He pulled out a thick manila folder. He tossed it onto the desk. Make your copy, he spat. There is a Xerox machine in the hallway, but the original stays here. That is my collateral. I picked up the folder. I opened it. There it was. The promissory note. $300,000. Interest rate 18%. And at the bottom, Desmond Carter. I looked closely at the signature. It was shaky. It looked like someone trying too hard to look like an old man. It looked like Trevon trying to copy the signature from my driver's license. But there was something else. I flipped to the notary page. The signature was witnessed by a notary public named Jessica Vane. I knew that name. Jessica was Brittany's college roommate. She wasn't a notary. Or if she was, she certainly hadn't seen me sign this paper because I was at the dentist the day this was dated. This was it. This wasn't just a bad loan. This was a conspiracy. I looked up at Rick. This signature is a forgery, I said. Rick shrugged. Not my problem. The kid came in with the deed and the ID. He said you were sick and couldn't come in. He had a power of attorney. A power of attorney doesn't let you sign a mortgage on a primary residence without the owner present, I said. You know that, Rick. You ignored it because you wanted the interest. Rick leaned forward. Look, Mr. Carter, I run a business. Your son scammed you. That sucks. But I have a lien on your house. Unless you can prove in a court of law that this is fake, I am going to foreclose. Now, are you going to call the inspector, or are you going to make your copy and get out? I stood up straight. I will make my copy, I said. I walked out to the hallway. My hands were trembling not from age but from adrenaline. I placed the documents on the glass of the copy machine. The light flashed rhythmic and blinding. Flash, flash, flash. Each page that slid out of the tray was another nail in Trayvon's coffin. Application, deed, ID scan. I gathered the warm papers. I folded them neatly and put them in my inside jacket pocket right next to my heart. I walked back into the office. I threw the original folder back on Rick's desk. You keep that, Rick, I said. You keep that safe. Because the FBI is going to want to see the original. Rick laughed nervously. The FBI. You are bluffing, old man. It's a family dispute. Mortgage fraud is a federal crime. Rick, I said, turning to leave. Using the mail or wires to facilitate it is wire fraud. That's 20 years. I stopped at the door and looked back at him. And Rick fixed that exit door. I would hate for you to get trapped in here when the heat comes down. I walked out of the building. The air on Western Avenue tasted like diesel fumes and rain, but to me it tasted like oxygen. I sat in my truck and locked the doors. I pulled out the copy of the loan application. I traced my finger over the fake signature. Trayvon had signed my name. He had signed away the house his grandfather bought. He had signed away my safety. But in doing so, he had signed something else. He had signed a confession. I looked at the notary stamp again. Jessica Vane, Brittany's friend. So Brittany wasn't just the beneficiary, she was the architect. She got her friend to notarize a fake signature. I started the truck. My hands were steady on the wheel. I had the audio recording of them plotting to sell the house. I had the bank statements showing the money going to casinos. And now I had the smoking gun, a fraudulent mortgage document with a fake witness. I wasn't just an old man anymore. I wasn't a victim. I was a prosecutor building a case. I drove away from the loan shark's office. The neon sign buzzed behind me, fading in the rearview mirror. I had one more stop to make before the birthday party. I needed to visit the IRS office with Marcus. Trayvon wanted a birthday gift. He wanted a legacy. I was going to give him a legacy he would never forget. A federal inmate number. The shark in the office thought he was dangerous. He had no idea. The most dangerous thing in the world isn't a man with a gun or a man with money. It is a father who has realized that his son is a monster. I patted the pocket with the papers. Happy birthday, Trayvon. Daddy got you exactly what you deserve. Marcus poured another cup of coffee. The steam rose in the quiet kitchen, swirling like the fog that was starting to roll in off Lake Michigan. We had been working for 4 hours. The dining room table was no longer visible. It was buried under a mountain of paper. Desmond, Marcus said, looking up from a spreadsheet that was so wide it took up 2 monitors. Come look at this. I walked over. My knees cracked. I felt every year of my 70 years in that moment, but my mind was sharp. What is it I asked? Marcus tapped the screen with a pen. Here. The date of the transfer. The day they moved the $800,000 from your account. August 12th, I said. I will never forget that date, right, Marcus said. And here's the date they filed their quarterly estimated taxes for their little LLC, September 15th. I looked at the line he was pointing to. Total income reported 0. Capital gains 0. Gift tax declaration none. I frowned. What does that mean? Marcus took off his glasses and looked at me. His eyes were serious. Deadly serious. It means, Desmond, that in the eyes of the United States government that money does not exist. They didn't report it as income because they would have to explain where it came from. And they didn't report it as a gift because that would require your signature on a gift tax return, which they didn't have. They are hiding it, I said. They are evading, Marcus corrected. And that is a very different beast. See, stealing from your father is a state crime. It is messy. It is family court. But hiding nearly $1 million from the IRS, that is a federal crime. That is tax evasion. That is money laundering. He leaned back in his chair. If you sue them in civil court to get the money back, it will take years. They will spend the money on lawyers to fight you. You might win a judgment, but if the money is gone, you get nothing. You get a piece of paper that says you were right. I looked at the rain hitting the window. I didn't want a piece of paper. I wanted justice. But Marcus continued, his voice dropping an octave. If we hand this to the Criminal Investigation Division of the IRS, they don't care about family drama. They don't care about excuses. They care about the math. And the math says your son and his wife are felons. Felons. The word hung in the air. I closed my eyes. Suddenly, I wasn't in Marcus's kitchen. I was back in my own living room 20 years ago. Trayvon was 15. He had just finished his first summer job painting fences for the neighbors. He had a stack of cash on the table. $500. He was so proud. Dad, he had said, eyes shining. I don't have to report this, right? It is cash. The government doesn't know. I remembered grabbing his hand. Not hard, but firm. I looked him in the eye. Son, I had told him, listen to me. You can cut corners on a lot of things. You can drive a cheap car. You can wear cheap clothes. But you never ever lie to the man who prints the money. You pay your taxes. You pay your dues. Because the government has a long memory and they have more lawyers than you have years left to live. Trayvon had rolled his eyes. You worry too much, Dad. He rolled his eyes then. And he was rolling the dice now. He had forgotten the lesson. Or maybe he just thought he was smarter than the system. He thought because he wore a suit and drank scotch, the rules didn't apply to him. I opened my eyes. I looked at Marcus. Do it, I said. Marcus hesitated. Desmond, once I send this, there is no taking it back. The IRS operates like a freight train. You can't just call them up next week and say, never mind, he is my son. They will prosecute. He will go to prison. Minimum 5 years. probably 10 with the mortgage fraud added on. I looked at the picture on Marcus's mantle. It was a picture of us from the Union picnic years ago. Trayvon was a toddler on my shoulders. I looked happy. That man in the picture was dead. He stole my past, Marcus, I said, my voice steady. He stole the years I spent breaking my back. He stole the safety I promised Viola, and he is planning to steal my future by putting me in a nursing home. I picked up the stack of papers. The evidence of the gambling, the fake mortgage, the tax evasion. He made his choice, I said. He chose the money over his father. Now I am choosing the law over my son. Marcus nodded slowly. He understood. He typed a few commands on his keyboard. The printer in the corner whirred to life. We are going to prepare a referral package, Marcus said. We will attach the audio recording, the bank statements, the forged deed, and this tax analysis. We will send copies to the IRS Criminal Division and the FBI White-Collar Crimes Unit. The printer spat out page after page. Each sheet was a bar in the cell I was building for my son. What about the timing, I asked. Marcus stacked the papers neatly. If we mail this today, it will hit an agent's desk by Monday. They will do a preliminary review. Given the amount and the clear evidence of forgery, they will move fast. But they will need to locate him. I smiled. A cold, mirthless smile. They won't have to look far, I said. Why, Marcus asked. Because next Saturday is his birthday, I said. He is throwing a party, a big one. He wants to show off his success. He wants to show off the empire he built with my money. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You are going to invite the feds to his birthday party. I'm going to hand him the envelope myself, I said. He asked for a gift. He asked me to sign over the house. I am going to give him exactly what he asked for, a transfer of assets, just not the assets he thinks. Marcus looked at me with a mixture of fear and respect. You are a cold son of a gun, Desmond. I learned from the best, I said. I learned from the people who tried to bury me. We spent the rest of the night organizing the file. We put everything in order. Tab A, the theft. Tab B, the forgery. Tab C, the tax evasion. It was a masterpiece of forensic accounting. It was undeniable. When we were done, Marcus put the entire stack into a thick manila envelope. He didn't seal it. He handed it to me. You need to deliver this copy to the special agent in charge, he said. I made a call. Agent Miller, he is expecting you tomorrow morning. I took the envelope. It felt heavy, heavier than a sledgehammer. I stood up to leave. The rain had stopped. The streetlights were reflecting off the wet pavement. Desmond, Marcus said softly, Are you sure you can do this? Watching them put handcuffs on him. I put my hand on the doorknob. I won't be watching them put handcuffs on him, Marcus. I will be watching them put handcuffs on a thief. My son died the day he looked at me and decided I was nothing more than a bank account to be drained. I walked out to my truck. The drive home was lonely. The city was asleep. I drove past the playgrounds where I used to take Trayvon. I drove past the high school where I cheered for him at football games. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I let it fall. It was the last one. I was not crying for Trayvon. I was crying for the wasted potential, for the arrogance, for the sheer stupidity of thinking you could build a castle on a foundation of sand. I got home and placed the envelope on my kitchen table. Next to it, I placed the invitation to the birthday party. It was gold embossed, heavy cardstock. You are cordially invited to celebrate the success and life of Trayvon Carter. I picked up a pen. I wrote on the back of the envelope, To Trayvon, from Dad. I went to the sink and washed my face. I looked in the mirror. The stubble was still there. The tired eyes were still there. But behind them, the steel was back. The actor was retiring. The foreman was back. I had 3 days until the party. 3 days to prepare my speech. 3 days to say goodbye to the ghost of the son I loved. And 3 days to make sure the trap was snapped shut so tight that not even a rat could wiggle out. I turned off the light. The kitchen went dark, but the envelope on the table seemed to glow in the moonlight. It was ready. The trap was set. All the mouse had to do was reach for the cheese one last time. The manila envelope sitting on my kitchen table looked innocent enough. It was standard office supply yellow. It cost 10 cents at the drugstore. But what was inside it was worth more than gold. Inside was the end of a life. Not my life. My son's life. I spent the morning of the day before the party staring at it. I had sealed it with tape, but I didn't need to see the papers to know what they said. I had memorized every line of the forensic accounting report Marcus and I had put together. It was a masterpiece of destruction. It was a blueprint for a prison cell drawn with numbers instead of steel bars. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Since I had mortgaged my truck and sold my tools to survive the last month, the silence had become a roommate I couldn't kick out. But today the silence felt different. It felt like the deep breath a diver takes before plunging into freezing water. At 2 p.m, the phone rang. I let it ring 3 times. I wanted them to wait. I wanted them to wonder if the old man was napping or if he had finally wandered off into the oblivion they were praying for. On the 4th ring, I picked up. "Hello," I said. My voice was raspy. I didn't have to fake it. I hadn't slept in 24 hours. Dad Traven's voice blasted through the speaker. It was too loud, too cheerful. It was the voice of a man trying to sell a used car with a cracked engine block. "Happy Friday. How are you doing, old-timer? I am okay," I said, pausing as if I was searching for the words. "Just watching the birds." "That is great, Dad. Listen, I am calling to confirm for tomorrow night. The big 3-6. You remember, right?" "I remember," I said. "Good," Trevon said. He let out a nervous laugh. "I was worried you might have forgotten, with how things have been lately. But listen, Dad, it is going to be a really special night. We have some major investors coming, people who can really take Carter Holdings to the next level." He paused. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the desperation in the silence. "And, Dad," he continued, his voice dropping a little, "there is one small favor I need." I gripped the phone tighter. "Here it comes." "What is it, son?" I asked. "Well, you know how we talked about streamlining your assets to keep them safe," Trevon said. "The lawyers sent over a little paperwork. It is nothing big, just a formality to update the insurance on the house. Since you are staying there alone, we need to make sure the liability coverage is optimized." Optimized, a fancy word for stealing. He wanted me to sign the quitclaim deed. He was going to slide it under my nose between a slice of cake and a glass of champagne, hoping the lights and the noise would confuse me enough to sign away my home. "I see," I said slowly. "Insurance. That sounds important. It is, Dad. Vital. So I am going to have the papers there tomorrow. Maybe we can sign them before the cake. Just get it out of the way so we can celebrate." I closed my eyes. The audacity was breathtaking. He was planning to evict me at his own birthday party. Before I could answer, another voice cut in. It was sharp, shrill, and closer to the phone. Brittany. She must have been listening on the other line, or maybe she grabbed the phone from him. "And Desmond?" she snapped. "Do not wear those work boots." "Brittany," I said. "I am serious," she said. "This is a black tie event. We have a reputation to maintain. The last time you came over, you looked like a janitor. These investors judge us by our family. If you show up looking like a charity case, you hurt the brand. Wear a suit, a clean one, and shave." I listened to her insults. A month ago, they would have hurt. They would have made me feel small. Today, they just felt like fuel. "I will do my best." "Brittany," I said meekly. "I don't have many suits that fit anymore. I have lost weight." "Buy one," she said. "Oh wait, you can't. Because we are managing your money now." "Fine." "Trayvon has an old suit from college in the guest closet. We will have the driver bring it over. Just try to look presentable. And don't talk to anyone about the construction business. Nobody wants to hear about pouring concrete. Just smile and nod." She was erasing me. She wanted a prop, not a person. I took a deep breath. It was time to set the hook. "I understand," I said. "I will look good. I want to look good for the presentation." "What presentation?" Trayvon asked, coming back on the line. "The presentation of my gift," I said. Trayvon laughed. "Dad, you don't have to get me a gift. We know you are liquid constrained right now. Your presence is enough." "No," I said. My voice became stronger. I dropped the senile tremor. I spoke clearly. "Trayvon, do you remember that old safe in the basement? The one behind the water heater?" There was silence on the line. "Yeah," Trayvon said slowly. "The one that was always locked. You said you lost the key years ago. I found the key." I said. I waited. 1 second, 2 seconds. "What was in it?" Brittany asked. Her voice was no longer sharp. It was hungry. I cleared my throat. I lowered my voice to a whisper as if I was afraid someone was listening. Your mother and I, we didn't trust banks entirely, I said. Not after the crash in 2008. We kept a reserve. A big one. How big, Trevon asked. I could practically hear him salivating. I sighed. I bought gold, son. Back in the 90s. And some land deeds in Georgia that grandfather left me. I never told anyone. Not even the IRS. Gold, Trevon breathed. I checked the value this morning. I lied. It is worth considerably more than the $800,000 you moved to the tech fund. I let that number hang in the air. More than $800,000. I could hear them moving on the other end. I could imagine the look on their faces, the greed lighting up their eyes like a slot machine hitting a jackpot. They thought they had drained the well dry, but suddenly they found a secret spring. Dad, Trevon said, his voice trembling with excitement. That is amazing. Why didn't you tell us? I forgot, I said, playing the dementia card again. I forgot until I found the key in my old jacket. But now, well, I want you to have it. For your birthday. It is too much for an old man to manage. Yes, Brittany yelled, forgetting to be cool. Yes, Desmond. That is a very sensible decision. We can add it to the portfolio. We can protect it for you. Bring it tomorrow, Trevon said. Bring the papers. Bring the gold. We will put it in the safe here. I will bring it, I promised. It is all in a big yellow envelope. I will give it to you right after I sign your insurance papers. A fair trade. A fair trade, Trevon agreed. He sounded drunk on imaginary wealth. Dad, you are the best. Seriously, I knew you were holding out on us. We love you, Desmond, Brittany chirped. See you tomorrow. Don't be late. They hung up. I sat there holding the dead phone. We love you. They loved the gold. They loved the idea of another $1 million to burn on yachts and watches. They didn't give a damn about me. If I had told them I found a box of old photos, they would have told me to leave it in the trash. But because I said gold, I was suddenly the beloved patriarch again. I stood up and walked to the kitchen table. I looked at the yellow envelope. There was no gold inside. There were no land deeds. There was a copy of the forged mortgage. There was the transcript of the recording where they planned to sell my house. There was the letter from the IRS confirming the investigation into tax evasion. And there was a signed confession from the notary public, Jessica, who I had terrified into flipping on them just an hour before the call. That was the reserve. It was a reserve of justice. I picked up the envelope. It felt heavy. They wanted a gift that would change their lives. They wanted a gift that was unforgettable. I smiled. It was the first real smile I had smiled in months. I am going to give you exactly what you want, Trevon, I whispered to the empty room. You want my legacy. You want everything I have built tomorrow night. You get it. I walked to the closet and pulled out my own suit, not the one they were sending. My suit. It was 20 years old, a charcoal gray wool that smelled of cedar and history. I brushed it off. I wasn't going to wear their costume. I was going to wear my armor. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Tomorrow the wolf steps into the snare, and the old construction worker was going to be the one pulling the wire tight. The drive to Lake Forest took an hour. It is a part of Illinois where the driveways are longer than the streets in my neighborhood. The houses here are not homes. They are estates. They sit behind iron gates and manicured hedges hiding from the world. I pulled my truck up to the gate of the address on the invitation. It was a sprawling mansion made of limestone lit up like a cruise ship in the night. There was a line of cars waiting to get in. A Bentley, a Maserati, a matte black G-Wagon, and then me, in a 20-year-old Ford F-150 with a rusted bumper and a toolbox in the bed. The valet kid looked at me like I had made a wrong turn. He was wearing a red vest and holding a ticket booklet. He waved me down, not to park, but to leave. Deliveries are in the back. Old-timer, he shouted over the noise of the engine. I rolled down the window. The air smelled of exhaust and expensive cologne. I am not a delivery driver, I said. I am the father of the host. The kid blinked. He looked at the truck, then at me, then back at the mansion. He smirked. A little disrespectful twitch of the lip. Right, he said. Just park it round the side. Okay? We don't want to block the view of the fountain. I didn't argue. I didn't care where the truck was parked. It wouldn't be there long. I stepped out onto the gravel. I smoothed down the front of my suit. It was charcoal gray double-breasted. I bought it for my 25th anniversary with Viola. It was a good suit, wool, sturdy, but it was cut for a different time. The lapels were a little too wide, the shoulders were a little too boxy, and it hung a little loose on me now. Stress eats away at a man's muscle faster than age does. I walked toward the front doors. They were open, spilling golden light onto the driveway. I could hear music, jazz, live jazz. A saxophone was crying out a melody that sounded like money being burned. I stepped inside. The foyer was bigger than my entire first floor. There was a chandelier hanging from the ceiling that looked like a frozen explosion of diamonds. Below it, a fountain bubbled with champagne. Not water, champagne. I stood there for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the brilliance. The room was full of people, beautiful people. Men in slim-fit tuxedos with watches that cost as much as a car. Women in gowns that shimmered like fish scales holding flutes of crystal. They were laughing. They were touching glasses. They were celebrating. But what were they celebrating? They were celebrating a lie. Every drop of champagne in that fountain was my blood pressure medication. Every hors d'oeuvre being passed around on silver trays was a mortgage payment I had made in 1985. The flowers' massive arrangements of white orchids that must have cost thousands were my retirement. I felt a wave of nausea. It wasn't just anger, it was disgust. It was the physical sickness of seeing your life's work turned into a carnival for strangers. I walked further into the room. I felt like a ghost. People glanced at me and looked away quickly. I didn't fit. I was a smudge on their perfect picture. I was the reality they were trying to ignore. Then I saw her. Brittany was standing near the grand staircase. She was wearing a dress that was the color of emeralds. It was backless tight and screamed for attention. She was holding a glass of wine and talking to a group of women who looked like clones of her. She saw me. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes went cold, ice cold. She excused herself and glided over to me. She didn't hug me. She didn't offer me a drink. "You made it," she said. Her voice was low so the people nearby couldn't hear the venom. "I told you I would come," I said. She looked me up and down. Her nose wrinkled slightly as if she smelled something bad. "I thought I told you to wear the suit we sent over," she hissed. "This is my suit," I said. "It is a good suit." "It looks like you bought it at a garage sale in 1990, she said. "Look at the sleeves. They are frayed. Desmond, honestly, we have the vice president of a hedge fund here. Do not embarrass us." I looked at her, really looked at her. Beneath the makeup and the jewels, she was just a small, frightened girl who thought money made her important. "I am not here to embarrass you, Brittany," I said calmly. "I am here to give Trayvon his gift." Her eyes lit up at the word gift. The greed was immediate. It replaced the disgust instantly. "Did you bring the papers?" she asked. "And the other thing." I patted the inside pocket of my jacket. The heavy yellow envelope was there. "It is all here," I said. "Good," she said. She patted my arm. A fake, patronizing pat. "Go grab a drink. Stay in the back. Trayvon is about to make a speech. Once he is done, we will do the signing in the library. Just try not to talk to anyone." She turned around and walked back to her friends. I watched her go. I saw her lean into a woman in a silver dress. She pointed her thumb back at me. I have good hearing. Or maybe she just wanted me to hear. "That is him," she laughed. "My father-in-law. Poor thing. He is totally senile. Look at him. He looks like a beggar who wandered in off the street. We just let him come out of pity." The women laughed, a cruel tinkling sound that rose above the jazz. A beggar! I looked down at my hands. They were rough, calloused. There was a scar on my thumb from a table saw accident. There was a burn mark on my wrist from welding. These were not the hands of a beggar. These were the hands of a builder. These were the hands that paid for the roof over her ungrateful head. I didn't react. I didn't storm over there. I walked to the edge of the room. I found a spot in the shadows near a pillar. I stood with my back to the wall. It is a habit from the construction site. Always know where the load-bearing wall is. Always have something solid behind you. A hush fell over the room. The music stopped. A spotlight hit the top of the staircase. Trayvon stepped out. He looked like a movie star. He was wearing a midnight blue tuxedo with a black lapel. His hair was freshly cut. He was holding a microphone in one hand and a glass of scotch in the other. He smiled. It was the smile that had charmed his mother. It was the smile that had fooled me. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed. His voice echoed off the high ceilings. "Thank you. Thank you all for coming to celebrate with me tonight." Applause. Cheering. Brittany was at the front, clapping the loudest. 36 years, Trayvon said, walking down the stairs slowly. 36 years on this planet. And I have to say, looking around this room, looking at the success we have built, I am humbled. Humbled. The word tasted like bile in my throat. He reached the bottom of the stairs and walked into the crowd. The spotlight followed him. "You know," he continued, "people ask me all the time, Trayvon, how did you do it? How did you build Carter Holdings from nothing? How did you create an empire in such a short time?" He paused for effect. He looked around the room, making eye contact with the wealthy strangers. "And I tell them," he said, his voice becoming serious, almost emotional, "I tell them it takes grit, it takes vision, it takes the courage to take risks when everyone else is afraid." He was talking about gambling. He was talking about betting my life savings on poker hands and crypto scams. But he called it vision. "I didn't have handouts," Trayvon lied. He looked right at the crowd, his face a mask of sincerity. "I didn't have a trust fund. I grew up on the South Side. My father was a simple laborer. He worked hard, sure. But he didn't understand the world of finance. He didn't understand leverage. A simple laborer." I tightened my grip on the envelope in my pocket. "I had to build this myself," Trayvon said, spreading his arms to encompass the room, the champagne, the lies. "I had to fight for every inch. And tonight, standing here with all of you, my partners, my friends, I can proudly say that Carter Holdings is just getting started. We have acquisitions in the pipeline that will change the landscape of this city." He was talking about selling my house, my home. That was his acquisition. "To the future," Trayvon shouted, raising his glass. "To the future," the crowd roared back. They drank, they cheered. The music started again. Louder, faster. Trayvon was surrounded. People were patting him on the back, shaking his hand, congratulating him on being a thief. He looked over the heads of his admirers. He scanned the room. He was looking for me. He spotted me in the shadows. He said something to Brittany, then pushed his way through the crowd. He walked toward me. He had a bounce in his step, the bounce of a man who thinks he has gotten away with murder. "Dad," he yelled over the music. He came up to me and threw an arm around my shoulder. He smelled of expensive scotch and sweat. "You saw the speech?" he asked. "I saw it," I said. "Did you like it?" "I tried to give you a shout-out, acknowledging my roots. You called me a simple laborer," I said. Trayvon laughed. He squeezed my shoulder. "It is a narrative, Dad. People love a rags-to-riches story. It sells. Don't be sensitive." He leaned in closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Did you bring it?" I nodded. "Is it in the envelope?" he asked, glancing at my pocket. "It is all in there," I said. "The deeds, the papers, the key." Trayvon licked his lips. I had never seen a human being look so hungry. "Okay," he said. "Okay, perfect. Listen, I am going to make one more toast in about 10 minutes. The big finale. Then we will go to the library and sign everything." "Brittany has the notary ready," I know I said. "Jessica." Trayvon froze for a second. "Yeah, Jessica. How did you know I guessed?" I said. "She is Brittany's best friend, right? Trayvon relaxed. "Anyway, just hang tight. Enjoy the party. Have a shrimp or something." He patted my cheek. A light, disrespectful tap, like I was a child. "Thanks, Dad. Seriously, this is going to change everything." He turned and walked back into the light, back to his adoring fans, back to the lie he had constructed so carefully. I watched him go. He was right. This was going to change everything. I looked around the room one last time. I memorized the faces of the people laughing at me. I memorized the smell of the lilies and the taste of the shame they tried to feed me. I pulled the envelope out of my pocket. I ran my thumb over the seal. Trayvon thought I was a simple laborer. He thought I was a man who just moved dirt from one place to another. He forgot that before you build a skyscraper, you have to dig a hole. A deep, dark hole. And tonight I wasn't the builder. I was the demolition man. And the fuse was already lit. I stood in the shadow of a marble pillar nursing a glass of sparkling water that I had not taken a sip from. The jazz band had stopped playing. The room, which had been a cacophony of laughter and clinking crystal, settled into a hushed anticipation. The air conditioner hummed a low drone that sounded like a warning. In the center of the room, bathed in a spotlight that cut through the dim ambiance, stood my son. Trayvon looked magnificent on the surface. His midnight blue tuxedo fit him like a second skin. His teeth were white, his skin glowed with the health that only money can buy, and his posture was that of a conqueror surveying his new kingdom. But I knew the truth. I knew that the foundation of this kingdom was made of sand and stolen retirement funds. He tapped the microphone. The sound thumped through the massive speakers vibrating in my chest. "Ladies and gentlemen," Trayvon boomed, his voice smooth and commanding. "Thank you again. But before we cut the cake, before we pop the vintage Dom Perignon that I had flown in specifically for tonight, I need to do something important. I need to acknowledge the man who started it all." He scanned the room, his eyes searching the shadows. He knew exactly where I was. He had told me to stay there, but this was part of the show. "Dad, where are you, Dad? Come on out here. Don't be shy." The crowd turned. Hundreds of eyes painted with expensive makeup and filled with judgment swept across the room. They found me. A 70-year-old man in an outdated charcoal suit standing alone by a pillar like a piece of furniture that had been forgotten during a renovation. A pathway opened up in the crowd. They moved away from me, not out of respect, but out of a desire to not be too close to the man who didn't belong. I pushed myself off the wall. My legs felt heavy but not weak. I walked slowly. I kept my head up. Brittany was standing near the stage, whispering to her friends. As I passed her, she didn't look at me. She looked at my shoes, checking to see if I had obeyed her orders. "Come on up here, Dad." Trayvon waved me over, flashing that $1,000,000 smile. "Give it up for Desmond Carter, everyone." A smattering of polite applause rippled through the room. It was the kind of applause you give to a charity case, the kind of applause that says, "Isn't it nice that they let him inside?" I climbed the 3 steps onto the raised platform. The spotlight hit me blinding and hot. For a moment, all I could see were silhouettes. I felt exposed. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. Trayvon threw his arm around my shoulder. He pulled me close. He smelled of scotch and arrogance. He was using me as a prop. I was the humble origin story that made his success look even more impressive. "Look at this man," Trayvon said into the microphone, his voice dripping with false sentimentality. "My father. A man who worked with his hands his whole life. A man who knows the value of $1, right, Dad?" He squeezed my shoulder. I didn't answer. I just stared out into the dark ocean of faces. "But here is the thing about my dad." Trayvon continued, and I heard the shift in his tone. The sentimentality was evaporating, replaced by a condescending smirk. "He is old school. He believes in burying money in the backyard. He believes that saving is better than growing." A few people chuckled. "When Mom died," Trayvon said, shaking his head theatrically, "Dad was lost. He was sitting on a nest egg that was doing nothing, just sitting there, rotting, losing value to inflation every single day. He was scared. He didn't understand the modern economy. He didn't understand that money is energy. It needs to move. He looked at me performing for the crowd, so I had to step in. I had to make the hard decision. I had to take the reins." He laughed, a sound that was meant to be charming but sounded predatory to my ears. "Dad, remember when you called me panicked about the transfer? You thought you were broke." The crowd laughed louder this time. "But I told you," Trayvon said, addressing the room now. "I told him, Dad, money just rots with you. It stagnates. You worked hard for it, sure. But you don't know how to enjoy it. You don't know how to multiply it." He turned to me, gripping my shoulder tighter, his fingers digging into the wool of my suit. "Let me spend it for you, Dad. Let me turn it into this, into connections, into power, into a legacy. Call it filial duty." Filial duty. The words hung in the air. The crowd erupted in laughter. They thought it was hilarious. The clever son taking care of the simple hoarding father. They clapped. They cheered for his theft. They toasted his betrayal. Brittany was in the front row, laughing so hard she had to hold onto her friend's arm. She pointed at me, mouthing something that looked like "poor old fool." Trayvon was beaming. He was soaking it up. He thought he had just delivered the perfect speech. He thought he had neutralized me by turning me into a joke. If everyone laughed at me, no one would believe me if I complained. It was a masterstroke of manipulation. He held the microphone out to me. "Say a few words, Dad," he urged, his eyes daring me to cause a scene. "Tell them how happy you are to see your son succeeding." I looked at the microphone. Then I looked at my son. He expected me to mumble. He expected me to be the stuttering, senile old man I had pretended to be for the last 2 weeks. He expected me to say thank you and shuffle off the stage so he could cut his cake. I took the microphone. My hand was steady, rock steady. I waited. I let the silence stretch out. 1 second, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. The laughter died down. The applause faded. People started to shift uncomfortably. The silence became heavy, pressing down on the room like a physical weight. Trayvon's smile faltered. He leaned in slightly. "Dad, just say thank you." I ignored him. I stepped forward out of his embrace, out of his shadow. I stood alone in the center of the spotlight. I raised the microphone to my lips. My voice when I spoke was not the raspy whisper of a defeated pensioner. It was the deep, resonant baritone of a foreman who had commanded crews of 200 men on construction sites where a single mistake meant death. "You are right, Trayvon," I said. My voice filled the room, bouncing off the vaulted ceilings. "You are absolutely right. I am old. I come from a different time. A time when a man's word was his bond. A time when you built things brick by brick, not by clicking a mouse or forging a signature." The room went deathly quiet. I saw Brittany stop laughing. She straightened up, her eyes narrowing. I looked at the crowd. I looked them in the eye, sweeping my gaze from left to right. "My son says money rots with me." I continued, my voice calm but cutting like a diamond saw. "He says I don't know how to use it. He calls it filial duty to take what isn't his to leverage the home I built with these hands to fund a lifestyle he hasn't earned." Trayvon stepped forward, his face flushing red. "Dad, okay, that is enough." I turned on him. I didn't shout. I just looked at him with such intensity that he actually took a step back. "I am not finished," I said, and the authority in my voice froze him in place. I turned back to the crowd. "He asked me for a gift tonight. He invited me here to sign some papers. He thinks I am here to sign away the last thing I own. He thinks I am here to give him the final piece of his empire." I reached into my inside pocket. The sound of the paper envelope sliding against the wool of my jacket was magnified by the microphone. It sounded like a sword being drawn from a sheath. I pulled out the yellow envelope. It was battered. It was cheap. It looked out of place in this room of silk and velvet. "But I agree with you, son," I said, turning to face him fully. "I shouldn't keep things that don't belong to me. I shouldn't hold on to things that I cannot manage." I held the envelope out. "So today I am returning to you exactly what you deserve. I am giving you the fruits of your labor. I am giving you the consequences of your vision." Trayvon looked at the envelope. He looked at me. He looked at the crowd. He was confused. He was expecting a deed. He was expecting a check. He saw the smile on my face, and for a second his greed took over. He thought I was capitulating. He thought I was giving him the imaginary gold I had lied about on the phone. He reached out. His hand was shaking slightly. "Take it, Trayvon," I said softly, so only he and the first row could hear. "It is the most expensive gift I have ever given you. It cost me my house. It cost me my retirement. It cost me my son." He grabbed the envelope. "Open it," I commanded into the microphone. "Open it." Someone in the crowd shouted, thinking it was part of the show. Trayvon tore open the yellow flap. He pulled out the stack of papers. The first page wasn't a check. It was a document with the seal of the Department of Justice. I watched his face. I watched the color drain out of it faster than water from a broken pipe. I watched his knees buckle slightly. He looked up at me. The arrogance was gone. The movie star was gone. All that was left was a terrified child. "Dad," he whispered, "what is this?" I leaned into the microphone one last time. "It is your inheritance, son." And then from the back of the room, the heavy oak doors swung open. They didn't open for a waiter. They didn't open for a guest. They opened for 6 men in windbreakers with bold yellow letters on the back. FBI. The music didn't start again. The applause didn't return. The only sound in the room was the dropping of a crystal glass. It hit the floor and shattered the sound, echoing like a gunshot. "Happy birthday, Trayvon," I said, lowering the microphone. I walked past him. I walked down the stairs. I walked through the parting crowd who looked at me now not with pity, but with fear. I had built the trap. I had baited it. And now the steel jaws had snapped shut. The room was vibrating with a silence so thick you could choke on it. The only sound was the rustle of the heavy yellow paper in Trayvon's hands. He held that envelope like it was the Holy Grail. To him it wasn't just paper. It was his salvation. It was the fuel for his yacht, the payment for his Rolex, and the deed to the future he thought he deserved. I watched him. I stood just 3 feet away, close enough to smell the fear sweating out of his pores beneath the expensive cologne. Brittany had edged closer, her eyes locked on the package, her lips parted in greedy anticipation. She looked like a cat watching a bird cage being opened. "Go on, son," I said into the microphone, my voice steady and amplified, reaching every corner of the ballroom. "Open it. Read it to your guests. A gift this big shouldn't be kept secret." Trayvon smiled nervously at the crowd. He ran a finger under the flap of the envelope. He tore it open. The sound was a sharp rip that echoed like fabric tearing. He reached inside. I could see the excitement in his fingers. He was expecting the heavy textured feel of a property deed. He was expecting the smooth, cool slide of a cashier's check. He pulled out the stack of documents. They were stark white, standard letter size, no gold leaf, no ribbons, just cold, hard legal paperwork stapled in the corners. The smile on his face didn't vanish instantly. It froze. It lingered there for a second, a ghost of an expression that hadn't yet received the memo from his brain that his life was over. He looked at the top page. I knew exactly what it was. It was a notice of seizure from Chase Bank. I watched his eyes scan the header. United States District Court, writ of attachment. His brow furrowed. He blinked as if trying to clear a smudge from a lens. He brought the paper closer to his face. What is this?" he whispered. The microphone caught it. It sounded like the whimper of a kicked dog. "Read it, Trayvon," I said. He shook his head. "No. This is a mistake. Dad, this says..." He couldn't finish the sentence. "It says that all assets held in the name of Carter Holdings have been frozen pending a federal investigation," I finished for him. My voice was calm, informative, like I was reading the weather report. Brittany gasped. She snatched the paper from his hand. Her sharp nails crinkled the edge. She read it furiously, her eyes darting back and forth. "Frozen," she screeched. "What do you mean, frozen? We have transfers pending. We have the yacht deposit." I pointed to the second document in Trayvon's hand. "Read the next one," I said. Trayvon looked down. His hand was trembling now. The paper shook like a leaf in a storm. It was a letter on thick government bond paper. The logo at the top was an eagle. Internal Revenue Service. Criminal Investigation Division. Trayvon's face went the color of ash. He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw true terror. Not the fear of being embarrassed, the fear of a man who sees the cage door slamming shut. "Tax evasion," I said to the room. "Failure to report income. Money laundering. You see, son, when you move $800,000 into a shell company and don't declare it, the government takes that personally." The crowd gasped. A low murmur started to ripple through the room. People began to step back. The circle around us widened. No one wants to be standing next to a tax cheat when the lightning strikes. "Dad," Trayvon stammered. "Dad, please. Stop. We can fix this. It is just a misunderstanding. I have an accountant. You don't have an accountant, Trayvon," I cut him off. "You have a gambling addiction and a wife with a shopping habit." I pointed to the last document, the thickest one. "And that one," I said, "that is my personal favorite." Trayvon looked at the final stack of papers. It was a criminal complaint. State of Illinois versus Trayvon Carter and Brittany Miller Carter. The charges were listed in bold type. Count 1, financial exploitation of an elderly person. Count 2, bank fraud. Count 3, forgery. And at the bottom in blue ink that was as steady as the hand that wrote it was my signature. Desmond Carter. Trayvon stared at my signature. He looked at it like he had never seen it before. You reported me," he whispered. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and wet. "Dad, I am your son." I leaned in close to the microphone. I wanted everyone to hear this. I wanted the investors, the friends, the hangers-on to hear exactly why this was happening. "You stopped being my son the day you forged my name to sell my house," I said. "You stopped being my son the day you looked at me and saw a walking ATM instead of a father. You wanted to manage my affairs? Well, I am letting you manage this." Brittany threw the papers on the floor. "This is insane," she yelled, her voice shrill and panicked. She turned to the crowd, flashing a desperate fake smile. "He is senile. Can't you see? He doesn't know what he is doing. He printed these off the internet. It is a prank. A sick, twisted prank." She looked around for support, but the faces in the crowd were stony. These were business people. They knew what a federal indictment looked like, and they knew what a sinking ship looked like. "Security!" Brittany screamed. "Get him out of here. He is ruining the party." But the security guards didn't move. They were looking at the back of the room. Trayvon dropped the papers. They fluttered to the floor, landing on top of the Persian rug he was so proud of. He looked at the wreckage of his life scattered at his feet. Why, he choked out. "Why didn't you just tell me? Why didn't you just ask for the money back?" "I did," I said. "I asked you in your apartment. I begged you. I told you I wanted peace. And you threatened to put me in a nursing home. You threatened to lock me away so you could buy a boat." I stepped closer to him. "You wanted a lesson in finance, Trayvon. Here it is. It is called a penalty. And the interest rate on betrayal is 100%. Trayvon fell to his knees. He didn't collapse gracefully. He just crumpled like a suit with no man inside it. He put his head in his hands and started to sob. It was a pathetic, broken sound that was amplified by the microphone I was still holding. Brittany was still screaming, trying to grab the papers, trying to tear them up as if destroying the copies would make the crimes disappear. "Stop it! Stop looking at us!" she shrieked at the guests. I looked down at my son. I felt a pang of phantom pain in my chest. This was the boy I had taught to catch a baseball. This was the boy I had held when he had nightmares. But that boy was gone. He had been consumed by the monster kneeling before me. I looked at the envelope still in my other hand. There was one thing left inside, a small silver key. I tossed it onto the floor next to him. It bounced with a tiny metallic ting. "That is the key to the safe," I said softly. Trayvon looked up, hope flickering in his eyes for a split second. "It is empty," I said, "just like your soul." I turned away from him. I felt light. The weight I had been carrying for months, the shame, the fear, the uncertainty, it was all gone. I had transferred it to him. I looked at the crowd. "The show is over," I said. "I suggest you all leave, unless you want to be interviewed as witnesses." That broke the spell. The crowd began to move, a sudden rush of silk and tuxedos heading for the exits. They scattered like cockroaches when the light turns on, but they weren't fast enough, because the doors didn't open for them. The doors opened for the men waiting outside. I heard the sirens then. They had been silent until now. But now they wailed, cutting through the night air. Blue and red lights began to flash against the high windows, painting the ballroom in the colors of justice. I walked down the steps of the stage. I didn't look back at my son on his knees. I didn't look back at his wife screaming at the air. I walked toward the bar. I picked up a glass of water. My throat was dry. It was done. The envelope was delivered. The message was received. And the bill had finally come due. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually happens right after a car crash before the screaming starts. Trayvon stood there clutching the papers, his face draining of color until he looked like a ghost in a tuxedo. The expensive paper crinkled in his shaking hands, a sound that seemed deafening in the quiet room. "Dad," he whispered, and his voice cracked like dry wood. "What is this?" I looked at him. I looked at the man who had been my pride and joy, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, the son I had taught to be a man. But that son was gone. The man standing in front of me was a stranger who had tried to sell my home to buy a boat. I leaned into the microphone. My voice was calm. It was the calm of a judge delivering a verdict. "That is your birthday gift, Trayvon," I said. My voice echoed off the vaulted ceilings, reaching every corner of the room, every guest who had been drinking his champagne and laughing at his jokes. "You wanted a legacy. You wanted to build an empire. Well, I have given you the foundation for your next 20 years. Trayvon looked up at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a terror that was finally real. He shook his head, a small, jerky motion of denial. "No," he breathed. "No, Dad. You can't." "It is 20 years in federal prison, son," I said, and I made sure every syllable was clear. 20 years for bank fraud, 20 years for tax evasion, 20 years for forging your father's signature to steal the roof over his head. A gasp went through the crowd. It started in the front row and rippled back like a wave. People began to back away. They put down their glasses. They stepped away from Trayvon as if he was contagious. In their world, being broke was bad, but being under federal indictment was a plague. Brittany was the first to move. She didn't move to comfort her husband. She didn't move to ask for mercy. She moved like a cornered animal. She lunged at Trayvon. Her nails, manicured to sharp points, dug into his arm as she snatched the papers from his hand. "Give me that!" she shrieked. Her voice was high and thin, piercing the air. It is a lie. It is all a lie. He is senile. He printed these off the internet. She started tearing the papers. She ripped the writ of seizure in half. She shredded the tax evasion notice. She threw the pieces into the air like confetti at a funeral. Look, she yelled at the crowd, her eyes wild and desperate. It is nothing. Just paper, just a crazy old man's prank. Everyone drink. Why aren't you drinking? But no one was drinking. They were watching her unravel. They were watching the facade of the perfect wealthy couple crumble into dust right before their eyes. I watched her tear the papers. I didn't stop her. I didn't need to. Brittany, I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. Tearing up the copies doesn't delete the file on the FBI server. She froze. She looked at me, her chest heaving, pieces of paper still clutched in her hands. You did this, she hissed. You ruined everything. We were going to be rich. We were going to take care of you. Take care of me, I asked, by putting me in a state home, by selling my house while I was still sleeping in it. I stepped off the small stage. I walked right up to them. I wanted to look them in the eye one last time before the handcuffs went on. You didn't want to take care of me, Brittany. You wanted to bury me. You thought I was weak. You thought because I work with my hands I don't have a brain. You thought because I am old I don't have teeth. I looked at Trayvon. He had sunk to his knees. He was staring at the scattered pieces of paper on the floor, weeping silently. You forgot one thing, son, I said softly. I am the one who taught you how to walk, and I am the one who has to teach you how to fall. Trayvon looked up at me. Tears were streaming down his face, ruining his makeup, dripping onto his silk lapel. Dad, please, he begged. Call them off. I will pay it back. I swear. We can sell the car. We can sell the jewelry. Just don't let them take me. It is too late for that, I said. The check has already bounced, Trayvon. The account is closed. Brittany grabbed my arm. Her grip was painful, desperate. Desmond, listen to me, she pleaded, changing tactics instantly. She tried to smile, but it looked like a grimace. We are family. You can't send your own family to jail. What will people say? Think about the family name. The family name, I repeated. My father's name. My name. The name you dragged through the mud to get a loan from a shark. I pulled my arm away from her. I brushed off the sleeve of my suit where she had touched me. I am protecting the family name, Brittany. I am making sure it doesn't stand for theft. And then the sound came. It started as a low wail in the distance, rising and falling like a mournful cry. Then another joined it, and another. Within seconds, the air outside the mansion was filled with a cacophony of sirens. Blue and red lights began to flash through the tall windows. They swept across the ballroom, painting the terrified guests in strobes of color. The crystal chandelier sparkled with the reflection of the police lights. The party was over. The heavy oak doors at the back of the room burst open, but it wasn't a guest arriving late. It wasn't a caterer with more champagne. It was a team of agents in blue windbreakers. On their backs in bright yellow letters was the acronym that ends all arguments, FBI. Everyone, freeze, a voice shouted. The crowd screamed. People dropped to the floor or pressed themselves against the walls. The jazz band knocked over a music stand in their haste to get away. Trayvon didn't move. He stayed on his knees, head bowed, defeated. Brittany screamed, "No, no. My dress." Two agents moved toward them. They moved with efficiency and purpose. They didn't care about the silk rug or the expensive flowers. They marched right through the center of the room. Trayvon Carter, an agent, barked, "You are under arrest." Trayvon stood up slowly. He held his hands out. He didn't fight. He looked at me one last time as the agent snapped the metal cuffs onto his wrists. "Dad," he whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Brittany fought. She kicked and screamed as a female agent cuffed her. She yelled that she knew senators, that she would sue them all. But the steel cuffs didn't care who she knew. They dragged them out, past the fountain of champagne, past the table of untouched food, past the guests who were now filming everything on their phones. I stood alone in the center of the room. The microphone lay on the floor where I had dropped it. A young agent walked up to me. "Mr. Carter," he asked. I nodded. "We have the perimeter secured. Your statement is already on file. You are free to go, sir." "Thank you," I said. I looked around the empty ballroom. The lights were still flashing outside. The party favors were scattered on the floor. It looked like a battlefield, and in a way it was. I had fought a war here tonight. A war for my dignity. A war for my home. I had won. But as I walked toward the exit, my heavy boots echoing on the marble floor, I didn't feel like a victor. I felt like a survivor. I walked out into the cool night air. The valet kid was standing there, mouth open, watching the police cars speed away with my son in the back seat. He looked at me. He looked at my old truck. He didn't smirk this time. I climbed into my Ford. I started the engine. It roared to life, a steady, reliable sound in the chaos. I drove away from the mansion. I drove away from the life Trayvon had tried to steal. I was going home, to my house, the house that was still mine. The house where I could sleep with both eyes closed, knowing that the wolves were finally in a cage. The chaos in the ballroom was not like the chaos of a construction site. On a job site, when something goes wrong, there is shouting and movement, but there is a purpose to it. Men run to fix the problem. Men run to save lives. But here in this palace of limestone and lies, the chaos was pure panic. It was the frantic scrambling of rats when the ship starts to list. The agents moved through the crowd like a blue wave. They were professional. They were efficient. They did not care about the vintage champagne or the silk dresses. They pushed past the hedge fund managers and the socialites who were pressing themselves against the walls, trying to make themselves invisible. I stood still. I was the eye of the storm. Then I saw him. Marcus walked through the heavy oak doors, flanked by 2 uniformed officers and the special agent in charge. Marcus was not wearing a windbreaker. He was wearing his Sunday suit. He held a thick file folder under his arm. He looked at me across the room and gave a single slow nod. It was the nod of a man who had done his job. The audit was complete. The ledger was balanced. Trayvon was still on his knees when the first agent reached him. My son looked up. His face was streaked with tears and snot. The arrogance that had defined him for the last 5 years had evaporated, leaving behind a terrified child who didn't understand why the world was hurting him. "Stand up, Mr. Carter," the agent ordered. His voice was flat, no emotion, just the law. Trayvon tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't work. He stumbled. The agent grabbed him by the arm of his expensive tuxedo and hauled him upright. "Turn around, hands behind your back." No, Trayvon whimpered. It was a small, pathetic sound. "No, please. I can explain. My father, he will tell you. Dad, tell them." He looked at me. His eyes were wide and desperate, searching for a lifeline. The agent didn't wait for me to speak. He spun Trayvon around. He pulled his wrists together. Click, click. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was louder to me than the sirens outside. It was a sound of finality. It was the sound of a steel door slamming on a life that could have been different. Across the room, Brittany was putting up a fight. She wasn't begging. She was screaming. She was scratching at the female agent who was trying to restrain her. "Get your hands off me," she shrieked. "Do you know who I am? My husband is the CEO of Carter Holdings. You will all be fired. I will sue you for every penny you have." Brittany, the agent said, calm but firm. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit bank fraud and money laundering. You have the right to remain silent." "I am not silent," Brittany yelled, spitting in the agent's face. "It wasn't me. It was him. It was Trayvon. He made me do it. He told me the money was his. I didn't know anything. I am a victim here." I watched her turn on him. I watched the love of his life throw him under the bus before the engine had even started. Trayvon heard her. He twisted his head around, his eyes filled with a fresh, new kind of pain. "Britt," he choked out, "how can you say that? We planned it together. The yacht, the house. It was your idea to sell the house," she screamed back at him. "Shut up, you loser. You dragged me into this. I should have listened to my mother. I should have married a real man, not a daddy's boy." The agents shoved them together, pushing them toward the center of the room. They were going to march them out the front door. As they passed me, Trayvon dug his heels into the marble floor. He fought against the grip of the agents. He twisted his body so he could face me. "Dad," he screamed. And this time, it wasn't a whimper. It was a guttural roar of betrayal. "Dad, what are you doing? I am your son. I am your blood. How can you do this to me?" He stopped, struggling for a second, just hanging there in the grip of the agents, panting heavily. "You are supposed to protect me," he sobbed. "You are my father. Fathers protect their sons. You are sending me to hell, Dad." "Why?" I looked at him. I looked at the man in the handcuffs. And then I looked past him to the ghost of the little boy who used to wait for me on the porch when I came home from work. I stepped closer. The agents tensed, ready to hold me back, but Marcus stepped forward and raised a hand, signaling them to let me speak. I stood toe-to-toe with my son. I could smell the fear on him. I looked him straight in the eye. I did not blink. I did not look away. "You are right, Trayvon," I said. My voice was low, but in the sudden silence of the room it carried like a bell. "I am your father. And for 35 years I thought being a father meant protecting you from the rain. I thought it meant giving you the things I never had. When you crashed your first car, I paid for it. When you failed college, the first time I paid for it. When you needed money for your first business, I gave it to you." Trayvon stared at me, tears dripping off his chin. "I thought I was loving you," I continued. "But I was wrong. I wasn't loving you, son. I was crippling you. I was teaching you that actions don't have consequences. I was teaching you that no matter how big of a mess you made, someone else would always clean it up." I pointed to the handcuffs on his wrists, the cold silver metal glinting under the chandelier. "So yes, because you are my son, I have to do this." I leaned in closer, my face inches from his. "I have to teach you the lesson I forgot to teach you for 35 years. I have to teach you responsibility." Trayvon flinched as if I had slapped him. "This isn't betrayal, Trayvon," I whispered. "This is parenting. It is the hardest parenting I have ever had to do. But I will not let you destroy another person the way you tried to destroy me. I will not let you become a monster. If prison is the only place you can learn to be a man, then that is where you are going." Trayvon's knees gave out. He sagged against the agents. He didn't argue anymore. The truth of my words had hit him harder than any fist. He realized finally that the bank of Dad was not just closed. It was demolished. "Move them out," the special agent ordered. The agents shoved them forward. As they began the long walk to the double doors, I looked around the room. The guests, the wealthy friends, the investors, they had not left. They had pulled out their phones. A sea of black rectangles was pointed at my son and his wife. Flashes went off. I could see the screens. Facebook Live, Instagram Live, TikTok. They were broadcasting the downfall. Brittany saw the phones. She tried to duck her head. She tried to hide her face behind her shoulder, but with her hands cuffed behind her back, she had nowhere to hide. "Oh my God, stop filming," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Stop it. Don't you know who I am?" Yes, they knew who she was. She was the woman who tried to steal an old man's home to buy a yacht. And now the whole world knew. Trayvon didn't scream anymore. He walked with his head down, chin on his chest. He walked past the people he had tried to impress. He walked past the people he had lied to. Every step was documented. Every second of shame was being beamed to satellites and bounced back down to millions of screens. This was the modern pillory. There were no Rotten Tomatoes, just comments and shares and likes. I watched them go. I watched my son being dragged out of the life he had stolen and into the reality he had earned. Marcus walked up beside me. He didn't say anything. He just placed a hand on my shoulder. A heavy, solid grip. "You did the right thing, Desmond," he said softly. "I know I said." My voice felt hollow. I watched the heavy doors swing shut behind them, cutting off the view of the flashing lights. "I know I did the right thing, Marcus, but it feels like burying him all over again." "It isn't a burial," Marcus said. "It is a resurrection. He was dead already, Desmond. The boy you knew was gone. Maybe, just maybe, when he gets out, he will be alive again." I nodded. I hoped he was right. I looked at the phone of a woman standing near me. On her screen, I saw the live feed from outside. I saw Trayvon being pushed into the back of a squad car. I saw the door slam shut. The comments were scrolling up the side of the screen faster than I could read. "Justice served. Greedy people. Team Dad." I turned away. I didn't want to read the comments. I didn't want the applause of strangers. I just wanted my house back. And I wanted to go home and sit in the silence and mourn the son who was still alive but lost to me forever. "Come on, Marcus," I said, turning my back on the empty party. "Let's go. I have an early morning tomorrow." "What are you doing tomorrow?" Marcus asked, falling into step beside me. I checked my watch. The Rolex on Trayvon's wrist was gone, now property of the U.S. Marshals. But my old Timex was still ticking. Tomorrow I said I am going to open the workshop. I have a lot of kids in the neighborhood who need to learn a trade. And I need to teach them how to build something real before the world teaches them how to steal. We walked out of the mansion, leaving the champagne fountain to bubble alone in the empty room. The party was over, but the work, The real work was just beginning. The visiting room of the Cook County Metropolitan Correctional Center does not smell like the lobby of a luxury hotel. It smells of industrial bleach, stale sweat, and despair. The air is cold, recycled through vents that hum with a low, monotonous drone. It is a place designed to strip you of your humanity layer by layer, until all that is left is a number in a criminal record. I sat on a metal stool that was bolted to the floor. The seat was cold against my legs. I kept my hands folded on the stainless steel ledge in front of me. On the other side of the thick, scratched plexiglass, the chair was empty. I had been waiting for 20 minutes. I looked around the room. I saw mothers crying into tissues that were already soaked. I saw girlfriends pressing their hands against the glass, trying to touch the men they loved. I saw lawyers in cheap suits looking at their watches, calculating their billable hours. I was not crying. I was not checking my watch. I was sitting with the patience of a man who has poured concrete and waited for it to cure. You cannot rush the process. If you pull the forms too early, the wall collapses. The heavy steel door on the other side buzzed. A guard stepped in, followed by a man in an orange jumpsuit. It took me a second to recognize him. It had only been 7 days, 1 week. But the man who shuffled toward the glass looked 20 years older than the man who had stood on the stage in a tuxedo. Trayvon's hair was matted. His face was covered in patchy stubble. His eyes, usually bright with arrogance, were red-rimmed and sunken. He wasn't walking with the swagger of a CEO anymore. He was walking with the slump of a man who has been broken. He sat down. He didn't look at me. He looked at the handcuffs chained to the metal loop on the table. He picked up the black phone receiver. His hand was shaking so badly he almost dropped it. I picked up mine. "Dad," he rasped. His voice sounded like it had been shredded by screaming. "Hello, Trayvon," I said. He looked up then, and when our eyes met, he broke. "Get me out of here," he sobbed. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I was. He just launched straight into the begging. "Dad, please, you have to post bail. The judge set it at $200,000. You can mortgage the house. I know you didn't sell it. You can leverage it. Please. I can't stay here." The guy in the cell next to me screams all night. "The food is rotten. I am going to die in here." I listened to him. I watched the tears roll down his face and splash onto his orange chest. I leaned forward. "Are you gambling in there, Trayvon?" I asked. He blinked, confused by the question. "What number? Of course not." "Good," I said. "That is 1 week clean. That is a start." "Dad, stop," he yelled, his voice cracking. "This isn't a game. I am in jail. I am in federal detention. You have to help me. You are my father. I am helping you," I said calmly. "Helping me." He slammed his hand against the glass. A guard stepped forward, hand on his baton. Trayvon flinched and pulled his hand back. "You call this helping? You put me here. You ruined my life." "I didn't ruin your life, son," I said. I interrupted the demolition. "You were the one swinging the wrecking ball." Trayvon wiped his nose on his sleeve. He looked around nervously, then lowered his voice. "It wasn't me, Dad. It was Brittany." I stared at him. "She made me do it," he whispered, his eyes wide and desperate. "She is the one who wanted the yacht. She is the one who wanted the penthouse. She told me I was a loser if I didn't provide for her. She threatened to leave me, Dad. She manipulated me. She is a witch. I was just trying to make her happy." I felt a cold disgust rise in my chest. It wasn't anger, it was disappointment, deep, crushing disappointment. "So now it is her fault?" I asked. "Yes," Trayvon nodded vigorously. "She is the mastermind. I am just a victim. If you get me out, I will testify against her. I will tell them everything. Just get me out, Dad. I promise I will pay you back. I have a new idea for a business." I hung up the phone. Trayvon froze. He tapped on the glass. "Dad, Dad." I sat there for a moment looking at him. He was mouthing the words. "Pick up the phone. Pick up the phone." I picked it up again. "Don't you ever lie to me again," I said. My voice was like granite. Trayvon recoiled. "You signed the papers, Trayvon. You forged my signature. You walked into that bank. You logged into the gambling sites. Brittany didn't hold a gun to your head. She just held up a mirror and you liked what you saw. You liked the reflection of a big shot. But she..." He started to argue. "She is in the women's wing." I cut him off. "And do you know what she is telling her lawyer right now? She is telling him that you forced her. She is saying you were abusive and controlling. You are both rats in a bucket eating each other to survive." Trayvon went pale. She wouldn't. She would, I said. And she is. But that doesn't matter to me. What matters is that you are sitting there, a grown man of 36, still blaming everyone else for your mistakes. I took a breath. This was the hardest part. This was the part where I had to cut off the limb to save the body. "I am not posting bail, Trayvon." Trayvon stared at me. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "The house stays free and clear," I said. "I am not risking the roof over my head again. Not for you, not for anyone." "Dad, no," he whispered. "You can't leave me here. The trial isn't for 6 months." "6 months, Dad. Then you have 6 months to think," I said. "Think about what he cried. Think about the man you want to be," I said. "Because the man you were outside, the man who stole from his father, the man who bought a Rolex while his father split pills, that man needs to die, Trayvon. And this place, this concrete box, this is the only place that can kill him." I stood up. "Dad, wait!" Trayvon yelled. He stood up too, rattling the chain on his cuffs. "Don't go. I am sorry. I am sorry about the money. I am sorry about the house. Just don't leave me." I looked at him through the glass. My heart was breaking. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to save him. To sell the truck, sell the house, do whatever it took to get my baby boy out of this cage. But I knew that if I did that, I would be killing him. I would be unleashing the addict back into the world. I would be robbing him of the only chance he had to hit rock bottom and build a real foundation. "I love you, son," I said. My voice trembled slightly. "I love you enough to let you suffer. I love you enough to let you hate me." "Dad," he screamed. I turned around. I walked toward the heavy steel door. I could hear him screaming my name. "Dad, Dad. Come back." Other visitors looked at me, some with pity, some with judgment. They saw a cold old man abandoning his son. They didn't see the truth. They didn't see the surgery. I pushed the door open. The buzzer sounded loud and harsh. I walked out into the hallway. The screaming stopped as the door clicked shut behind me. The silence rushed back in heavy and suffocating. I leaned against the wall for a moment. I closed my eyes. I let myself feel the pain. It washed over me like a wave, cold and suffocating. I felt the tears finally prick at the corners of my eyes. But I didn't turn back. I straightened my coat. I adjusted my hat. My son was alone now, truly alone for the first time in his life. He had no money. He had no wife to hide behind. He had no father to bail him out. He had nothing but 4 walls and the truth. And that was the only place where redemption could start. I walked out of the prison and into the parking lot. The sun was shining. It was a bright, brutal light that exposed everything. I got into my truck. I didn't start it right away. I sat there and looked at the gray fortress of the detention center. "Sleep well, Trayvon," I whispered. I put the truck in gear and drove away. I had a workshop to open. I had wood to sand. I had things to build. My son's reconstruction project had begun, and the first step was demolition. The week after the arrest was a blur of lawyers' suits and paperwork, but it was not the kind of paperwork that drowns you. It was the kind of paperwork that sets you free. I stood in the office of the branch manager at the bank. It was the same bank where I had discovered my account was empty just a month ago. It was the same manager, Ms. Henderson, sitting behind the desk. But this time, she wasn't looking at me with pity. She was looking at me with respect and a little bit of fear. "Mr. Carter," she said, pushing a document across the mahogany desk. "Our legal department has reviewed the affidavit from the notary and the forensic report on the signature." I looked at the document. It was a release of lien. She continued, her voice professional and crisp. "We have determined that the mortgage taken out on your property at 43rd Street was executed fraudulently. The bank is rescinding its claim on the title. Your home is yours, Mr. Carter, free and clear." I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I signed my name, the real signature, the one that meant something. When I walked out of that bank, I felt lighter. The invisible weight that had been crushing my chest for weeks, the fear of waking up to a sheriff's eviction notice, was gone. I drove to my house. I parked my truck in the driveway. I walked up to the porch and touched the brick. It was cold and rough and solid. It was mine again. But the victory was not complete. I had my house, but my retirement account was still a wasteland. $12.45. You cannot live on $12. You cannot buy heart medication on $12. I had to go back to the scene of the crime. The judge had granted me temporary control over the assets seized from Trayvon and Brittany to pay restitution. The FBI had taken the cash and the computers for evidence, but the physical property, the toys they had bought with my life savings, were left behind. I took Marcus with me. We took the elevator up to the penthouse. The yellow police tape had been removed, but the door still felt heavy. I unlocked it and stepped inside. The apartment was silent. The panoramic view of Chicago was still there, breathtaking and expensive. But the soul of the place, if it ever had one, was gone. It felt like a tomb filled with designer labels. I didn't come here to reminisce. I came here to liquidate. I had hired an estate liquidator, a man named Mr. Solomon. He was a small, sharp-eyed man who knew the value of everything and the worth of nothing. He was already there, walking through the living room with a clipboard tagging items with small, colored stickers. "Mr. Carter," Mr. Solomon said, nodding at me, "it is quite a collection. Your son, he had expensive taste." "He didn't have expensive taste," I said, walking over to the glass display case in the corner. "He had expensive insecurities." I opened the case. Inside sat the watches. There were 5 of them. The Rolex Submariner, a Patek Philippe, a Breitling. They sat on little velvet pillows, ticking away the seconds of a life that was now paused in a jail cell. I picked up the Rolex. The gold was heavy, cold. "This watch cost $40,000, I said to Marcus. Marcus nodded. "That is a lot of overtime, Desmond." I looked at the dial. I didn't see a luxury timepiece. I saw my blood pressure medication. I saw the groceries I hadn't bought. I saw the leaky faucet I hadn't fixed because I couldn't afford a plumber. "Sell it," I told Mr. Solomon. "Sell them all. I don't care if you get top dollar. Just get them out of my sight." Mr. Solomon made a note on his clipboard. "We can put these in the upcoming auction. The market for luxury watches is strong. You should see a significant return." I walked into the bedroom. Brittany's domain. The closet was bigger than my kitchen. It was lined with shelves that reached the ceiling. And on every shelf sat a bag: Hermes, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, Nell. They were lined up like soldiers in an army of greed. Some of them still had the tags on them. She hadn't even used them. She just bought them to have them, to look at them, to know that she could. I reached out and touched a red leather bag. The receipt was still inside. $12,000. For a bag. I thought about the kids in my neighborhood. The ones who walked to school in the winter without proper coats. The ones I was trying to teach in my workshop who used rusty tools because we couldn't afford new ones. $12,000 could buy coats for the whole elementary school. It could buy a new table saw and a lathe and enough lumber to keep my boys busy for a year. Brittany bought a bag to carry her lipstick. Mr. Solomon walked in behind me. He whistled low and impressed. "Birkins," he said reverently, "and Kelly's. Mr. Carter, this closet is worth more than most houses in the Midwest." "Sell it," I said. "Every stitch, every shoe, every scarf." I watched as his team began to pack the bags into boxes. They handled them with white gloves, treating them like holy relics. I just wanted them gone. I wanted to scrub the stain of their selfishness from the world. We spent 2 days clearing out the apartment. We sold the furniture. We sold the silk rugs. We sold the crystal glasses that they had used to toast their theft. And then there was the car. The G-Wagon was parked in the garage on level 4. It was matte black. Huge. Aggressive. A tank designed for a war zone driven on paved streets to buy lattes. I stood there while the tow truck driver hooked it up. "You selling this, boss?" the driver asked, looking at the beast. "I am," I said. "Shame," he said. "It is a hell of a ride." "It is not a ride," I said. "It is a hearse." I watched it roll away. I didn't feel a pang of regret. I didn't feel a sense of loss. I felt like I was watching a tumor being cut out. A week later, I sat in Mr. Solomon's office. He had a check on his desk. "The auction went well, Mr. Carter," he said, smiling. "Better than expected, actually. The story, well, the news coverage of the arrest actually drove up the prices. People like owning a piece of a scandal." He slid the check across the desk. I looked at the number. $312,000. I stared at it. My life savings had been $800,000. I was still down nearly $500,000. $500,000 of sweat and early mornings and missed holidays. $500,000 that was supposed to be my cushion against the world. It was gone. Burned up in depreciation, lost to fees. eaten by the reckless spending that happens when you didn't earn the money you are spending. I picked up the check. "Is it enough?" Desmond Marcus asked gently. He had been with me every step of the way. I looked at the check again. $300,000. It wasn't a fortune. It wouldn't buy a yacht. It wouldn't buy a penthouse. But it would buy groceries. It would buy my medicine. It would pay the property taxes on the house on 43rd Street for the rest of my life. It was enough. "It is enough, Marcus," I said. "It is enough to live, and it is enough to sleep at night." I folded the check and put it in my pocket. It felt lighter than the envelope I had given Trayvon, but it felt more real. We walked out of the office into the Chicago afternoon. The wind was blowing off the lake, crisp and clean. "I lost a lot, Marcus," I said as we walked to my truck. "I paid a $500,000 tuition fee." "Tuition for what?" Marcus asked. "Tuition to learn the truth," I said. "To learn that you can't buy loyalty. To learn that you can't build a future for your children if you don't teach them how to build it themselves." I got into my truck. The seat was worn. The engine rattled when I turned the key. It wasn't a G-Wagon. It wasn't a luxury ride. But it was mine. I drove to the bank and deposited the check. I watched the teller type in the numbers. The balance on the screen changed, from $12 to $312,012. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just nodded. I walked out of the bank. I had taken back what I could. I had salvaged the wreckage. My son was in a cell. My money was half gone. My heart was scarred, but I was still standing. I was Desmond Carter. I was a builder. And a builder knows that sometimes you have to tear a structure down to the studs to fix the rot. I had torn it down. The debris was cleared. Now it was time to rebuild. Not a fortune, but a life. A quiet, honest life. I drove home. I pulled into the driveway. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the brick front of my house. I sat on the porch for a long time watching the streetlights come on. I was poorer than I was a month ago, but I was richer too. I had my dignity back, and that, as I had told Trayvon, is something you cannot put a price tag on. The smell of sawdust is the most honest smell in the world. It smells like potential. It smells like the forest and hard work and the simple truth that if you cut a board too short, no amount of talking will make it grow back. You cannot lie to wood. You cannot scam a level. Gravity and geometry are the only laws that matter in my workshop, and they are strict judges. 6 months have passed since the flashing lights reflected off the crystal chandelier at that mansion in Lake Forest. 6 months since I watched my son walk out of my life in handcuffs. The seasons have changed. The brutal Chicago winter has melted away, leaving behind the wet gray promise of spring. And just like the city, I am thawing out too. I converted my 2-car garage into a classroom. I used some of the money from the auction, the money that used to be a G-Wagon and a closet full of Birkin bags, to buy 6 sturdy workbenches. I bought chisels, hand-planed saws, and enough clamps to hold a skyscraper together. I didn't open this shop for money. I opened it for the ghosts. I look around the garage. It is Saturday morning. The air is filled with the sound of sandpaper on pine. 6 boys ranging from 14 to 17 years old are bent over their projects. They are boys from the neighborhood. Boys who look like Trayvon did at that age. Skinny, restless, eyes darting around looking for a shortcut. Jamal, a 16-year-old with a chip on his shoulder the size of a cinder block, throws his sanding block down. "This takes too long." "Mr. Carter," he complains, "why can't we use the electric sander?" I walk over to his bench. I pick up the piece of wood. It is a simple leg for a stool. It is still rough in places. "Because the machine is fast, Jamal, but it is dumb," I say. "The machine doesn't feel the grain. The machine doesn't know when to stop. If you use the machine before you know the wood, you will ruin it." Jamal rolls his eyes. It is the same eye roll Trayvon used to give me. The same impatience. The same desire to get to the finish line without running the race. My heart tightens a phantom pain, but I push it down. I am not raising Jamal. I am teaching him. There is a difference. "Pick up the block, son," I say firmly. "You don't get the power tools until you earn the hand tools. That is the rule. If you don't like it, the door is open." Jamal looks at the door. He looks at me. He sees that I am not moving. He picks up the block. He starts sanding again. I watch him. I am teaching them what I failed to teach my own son. I am teaching them that the value of a thing comes from the sweat you put into it, not the price tag you put on it. The program grew faster than I expected. The mothers in the neighborhood started whispering. They said there was an old man on 43rd Street who was taking the wild boys off the corners and putting hammers in their hands. They started bringing me pies. They started bringing me their sons. We outgrew the garage quickly. We moved the weekend classes to the basement of the Southside Community Center. It is a big, echoing space with concrete floors and high windows that let in the dusty afternoon light. That is where I met Clara. Clara runs the food pantry down the hall. She is a woman of about 65 with skin the color of deep mahogany and hair that she wears in silver braids piled high on her head. She moves with a quiet efficiency, the kind of woman who has carried heavy burdens all her life but never complains about the weight. The first time we spoke, I was struggling to carry a stack of lumber through the back door. She didn't ask if I needed help. She just grabbed the other end of the stack. "Pivot," she said. We maneuvered the wood into the room without a word. When we set it down, she wiped her hands on her apron and looked at me. "You are the carpenter," she said. "The one everyone is talking about." "I am just a retired man trying to keep busy," I said. She smiled. It was a slow, warm smile that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. "You are the one whose son made the news," she said. I stiffened. I was used to the judgment. I was used to people looking at me and wondering how a decent man raised a criminal. "Yes," I said defensively. "That is me." Clara didn't flinch. She didn't look away. "My youngest is in Stateville," she said softly. 5 years for distribution. The air between us changed. The tension evaporated. We weren't strangers anymore. We were members of the same club. The club of parents who did their best and still lost the war. "I am sorry," I said. "Don't be," she said. "He made his choices. I made mine. My choice is to feed people. Your choice is to teach them. We are just cleaning up the mess, Desmond. One board and one can of soup at a time." Since then, Clara has become a friend, a real friend, not a business partner, not a social climber, just a woman who brings me a thermos of coffee on Saturday mornings because she knows I forget to make it. Today, after the boys clean up the sawdust and head home, Clara walks into the workshop. She is holding 2 paper cups. "Black, no sugar," she says, handing me one. "Thank you, Clara." She leans against a workbench, looking at the stool Jamal finished today. She runs her hand over the seat. It is smooth, perfectly level. "He did a good job," she says. "He wanted to quit 3 times," I tell her, taking a sip of the hot coffee. "He wanted to cheat, but he stayed." "Because you stayed," she says. She looks at me. "You are good for them, Desmond. You are showing them a way out." "I am just showing them wood, Clara." "No," she shakes her head. "You are showing them that a man can be strong without a gun. You are showing them that a man can be rich without a chain around his neck. You are giving them a father even if it is just for 4 hours a week." I look down at my coffee. The praise sits heavy in my chest. "I couldn't do it for Trayvon," I whisper. The guilt is always there. A background noise like the hum of a refrigerator. Clara reaches out and places her hand on my arm. Her hand is warm. "Trayvon had a father, Desmond. He just chose not to listen. These boys, they are listening. Don't punish yourself for the ears that were closed. Be grateful for the ones that are open." We stand there in the quiet workshop surrounded by the smell of oak and pine. For the first time in years, I don't feel alone. I don't feel the crushing solitude of my empty house waiting for me. Speaking of Trayvon, the letters have changed. For the first 3 months, they were angry. He wrote pages and pages of blame. He blamed me. He blamed the judge. He blamed the system. He told me the food was garbage. He told me the bed was hard. I didn't reply to the anger. Then the begging started. He asked for money for the commissary. He asked for new sneakers. He wanted me to send him $500 so he could buy protection. I wrote back then, "No money, Trayvon. You are in there to learn how to survive on your own. If you need protection, earn respect. Keep your head down. Do your time." Last week I got a letter that was different. It was short. The handwriting was smaller, less frantic. "Dad," it read, "I got a job in the prison woodshop. It pays 12 cents an hour. I am making coffins for the state burials. It is hard work. My hands are blistering. I wanted to quit yesterday. But then I remembered the deck we built when I was 12. I remembered you telling me to measure twice cut once. I measured 3 times today. The warden said it was the straightest cut he had seen all week. I miss you. Trayvon." I keep that letter in my shirt pocket right next to my heart. It isn't an apology. It isn't a redemption. But it is a start. He is holding a tool. He is feeling the wood. He is earning 12 cents an hour. It is the first honest money he has made in his life. I finish my coffee and walk Clara to her car. The sun is going down, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of purple and orange. "Will I see you next week?" I ask her. "You couldn't keep me away," she says. She hesitates, then looks at me. "There is a jazz concert in the park on Sunday. Free admission." I was thinking of going. I haven't listened to jazz since the party, since the saxophone played while my son lied to a room full of people. But looking at Clara, seeing the gentle hope in her eyes, I realized that the music wasn't the problem. The lie was the problem. "I would like that," I say. "I will polish my boots." She laughs. A bright, happy sound. "You do that, Desmond." I drive home. My truck rattles over the potholes, but I don't mind. I turn onto 43rd Street. My house is there. The brick is sturdy. The windows are dark, but they don't look lonely anymore. They look peaceful. I walk up the steps. I unlock the door. The silence inside is different now. It isn't the silence of loss. It is the silence of rest after a long day of work. I go to the kitchen. I place Trayvon's letter on the table. Next to it, I place the lesson plan for next week's class. I am 70 years old. I have lost a fortune. I have sent my son to prison. But as I sit there watching the dust motes dance in the last light of the day, I realize something. I am building again. I am not building skyscrapers. I am not building bank accounts. I am building men. I am building a second chance for myself. And slowly, board by board, nail by nail, I am rebuilding the peace that I thought was gone forever. I take a deep breath. The air smells of lemon polish and old wood. It is a good life. It is a hard life, but it is mine. And this time, the foundation is solid rock. The sun is finally dipping below the rooftops of the 3 flat buildings across the street. It is that golden hour in Chicago when the brick facades glow like embers in a dying fire. I am sitting on my front porch in the same rocking chair I have owned for 20 years. The wood of the armrest is smooth under my hand, polished by decades of worry and rest. Down the block, I can see Jamal walking home. He is carrying the stool he finished today. He is holding it away from his body so the fresh stain doesn't get on his jeans. He walks differently now. He doesn't shuffle. He doesn't look down at his sneakers. He walks with his chin up, looking at the world like a man who has made something with his own 2 hands. I watch him turn the corner and disappear. That is my legacy walking down the street. For a long time, I was confused. I thought legacy was a checkbook. I thought it was the $800,000 I had scraped together in that retirement account. I thought that by leaving that pile of cash to Trayvon, I was leaving him a future. I was wrong. I was leaving him a loaded gun. Money without values is just acceleration. If you give a car to a man who doesn't know how to drive, he is going to crash it. And that is exactly what Trayvon did. He took the fuel I gave him, and he drove straight into a wall. I take a sip of the iced tea Clara left for me. The ice chimes against the glass. The house is quiet behind me. For months, this silence felt like a punishment. It felt empty. It felt like failure. But tonight, the silence feels different. It feels like the quiet of a cathedral after the service is over. It is a holy silence. I think about Trayvon sitting in his cell tonight. I wonder if he is looking at the same moon I am. People tell me I was ruthless. Even some of the neighbors, the ones who don't know the whole story, they look at me with wary eyes. They whisper that Desmond Carter is the man who sent his own son to prison. They think I am cold. They don't understand the nature of rot. When I was a young foreman, we were renovating an old Victorian house in Hyde Park. It was beautiful on the outside. Fresh paint. Ornate trim. But when we opened the walls, we found the black mold. It was eating the studs. It was poisoning the air. The owner wanted to patch it up. He said it would cost too much to tear it out. He said he loved the house too much to gut it. I told him that if he loved the house, he had to hurt it. He had to cut out the rot, or the whole thing would collapse on top of his children. Trayvon was the rot. It kills me to say it. It tears a piece of my soul away to admit it. But my son had become a cancer in this family. His entitlement, his greed, his absolute refusal to take responsibility, it was eating us alive. It consumed my savings. It almost consumed my home. And if I had let it continue, if I had bailed him out one more time, it would have consumed his soul completely. I didn't send him to prison to punish him. I sent him to prison to stop the infection. I rock back and forth. The chair creaks, a familiar, comforting rhythm. I have $300,000 in the bank. I have a 20-year-old truck. I have a suit that is a little too big for me. By the standards of the people at that party in Lake Forest, I am a failure. I am a nobody. But I look at the workshop in my garage. I think about the 6 boys who will come back next Saturday. I think about the letter in my pocket where my son talks about the pride of a straight cut. I am richer today than I was when I had the full 800,000. Because I have my truth. I realize that you cannot buy a man's character. You have to build it. You have to hammer it into shape. You have to sand down the rough edges until it is smooth. I failed to do that for Trayvon when he was a boy. I was too busy working. I was too busy trying to give him the things I never had instead of teaching him the things I learned the hard way. But I am fixing that mistake now. It is a late renovation, but it is better than letting the house fall down. A car drives by, the bass thumping from the speakers. It reminds me of the music at the party. It reminds me of the moment I handed Trayvon that envelope. I don't regret it. I remember the look on his face, the shock, the horror, but I also remember the look on his face last week in the visiting room, the clarity, the humility. He is suffering. I know he is. Prison is a hard place, but steel is forged in fire. You cannot make a blade without heat and pressure. I am hoping that the man who walks out of those gates in a few years will be a man I can respect, a man I can invite onto this porch for a glass of tea. And if he isn't, if he comes out and goes back to the grift, if he blames me forever, then I will still be sitting here. I will still be teaching my boys in the garage. I will still be walking with Clara on Sundays. Because I have learned that my peace does not depend on his approval. My dignity does not depend on his success. I own this house. I own my life. I stand up. My knees are stiff, but they hold me. I look out at the street one last time. The streetlights have flickered on, buzzing like fireflies. Viola would have been sad. She would have cried for him, but she would have stood beside me. She knew the difference between love and enabling. She knew that sometimes the only way to save a drowning man is to stop swimming out to him and force him to kick for shore. I turn around and open the screen door. It closes behind me with a solid latch. I am Desmond Carter. I am a builder. I have cleared the rubble. I have poured a new foundation. And tomorrow, I have work to do. I learned the hard way that the most dangerous thief isn't the stranger breaking into your house, but the entitled child sitting at your dinner table. We often confuse enabling with loving, thinking that giving our children everything will make them happy. It doesn't. It makes them weak. True love sometimes means letting them fall. It means handing them the consequences of their actions wrapped in an envelope of tough love. I lost my savings, but I regained my dignity. If you are a parent holding on to a toxic relationship out of guilt, remember this. You don't owe anyone your peace of mind, not even your own flesh and blood. Thank you for listening to my story. It was not easy to tell, but it was necessary. Now I want to ask you a question, and I want you to be honest in the comments. If you found out your child was stealing from you to fund a lavish lifestyle, would you have the courage to call the police, or would you try to cover it up to save the family name? Let me know what you would do. If this story touched you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories of justice and resilience coming. Stay strong and never let anyone take your dignity. See you in the next video.